My entitled sister disowned the entire family and cursed all of our names, saying that she wants nothing to do with any of us for the rest of her life. But now, even with this stance, she still expects us to buy Christmas presents for her kids, despite the fact she said she would call the police and file a report if we ever contacted her ever again. And I'm honestly so done with my sister because her antics are incredibly exhausting. Here's what's happening. Several years ago, my sister heard a rumor about my brother and automatically went onto social media, shared personal details about him, and refused to let him come near her children going forward. And this rumor, by the way, turned out to be nothing to do with my brother. Well, my sister continued to share false accusations about him and refused to listen to anyone. Her relationship with different family members disintegrated, and she sent a message to all family members saying she would disown them and not let them see her children unless they cut my brother off. Now, I didn't agree to that, and neither did any of my other family, so she carried through with her remarks and blocked everyone online and stopped attending family events. A few months of silence followed before being interrupted by an email sent to half the family. She accused everyone of upsetting her children because they didn't send them any presents or Christmas money for Christmas. Well, the explanation was that we would have, but the last time someone had contacted her, she had sent them a reply full of insults and said she would file a police report if anyone contacted her. This continued to the next birthday for one of her children, where once again, she messaged family saying that she thought we would have learned our lesson from Christmas. She then followed this up by expecting my parents to kick my brother and I out of the house for a week so that she and her children could stay with them while they were in between moving homes, despite not having talked to my parents for literally months. Well, this was shot down, but not without social media posts about family ignoring family, and started accusing us of disowning her instead and that we hated her kids. Now, we still don't talk to her, and whilst I miss my nieces and nephews, I honestly do not miss my sister's entitlement, because her attitude is honestly so repulsive. Oh man, this is some crazy behavior. You're telling me that this lady literally thought, oh yeah, I'm gonna cut all of you off, but also you need to give my kids Christmas presents. Like, dude, what are you talking about? You can't say you're gonna file a police report and then insult everyone and then still expect something out of anybody. That's some crazy entitled behavior, dude. Like, that is not okay. And I love the part where she's like, okay, kick these people out of the house so me and my kids can show up. And it's like, oh, okay, here are your parents who literally have not talked to you for months, and now you suddenly think we're just gonna give in to your weird demands and do whatever you say? Like, dude, what are you talking about here? But all jokes aside, this really sucks for the kids because they do not deserve this at all. Like, seriously, they've done nothing wrong, and yet their mom is acting like a crazy psychopath. I've run into people like this in my own life where they try to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna keep my kids away from you. We're disowning you and we want nothing to do with you. Where they then try to act like, oh, my kids are being kept away from you as a punishment. But it's like, dude, I could care less about your kids. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't mind seeing nieces and nephews, but like, if you're gonna hold them against me and be like, oh yeah, I'm not gonna let you see them, then trust me, I'm gonna move forward just fine with my life and not have any problems with this. Like, you're not hurting me by not allowing me to see the kids, you're only hurting your kids. Like, this doesn't affect me at all. I'll be completely fine. Instead, it's your kids that are gonna miss out on having a positive role model in their life who actually cares about them. Which, by the way, why would I be a part of your life when you just cut off the entire family, while also simultaneously expecting Christmas gifts all the time? Like, this is some crazy logic, dude. I just don't understand this. So yeah, your sister's an idiot, especially after false accusations that she started. And the fact that she's not willing to make amends and apologize or do any of those steps to try and make things right, in my opinion, is some absolutely insane behavior. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. My entitled roommate was so bad that when he left, he smashed all the things he couldn't bring with him. So I decided to get some petty revenge by racking up the internet bill at my apartment, as he forgot to cancel his plan before he got kicked out. Here's what happened. Okay, so years ago, I had a crappy roommate who didn't pay on time. So eventually, I gave him a 2-month warning. He threatened me, it got ugly, but he did eventually leave. Now, because he is a loser, he burned all his connections, and I'm assuming he had no one to help him move, and everything he couldn't take, he just smashed. That way, I couldn't sell it or use it. And we're talking stuff like the kitchen table, chairs, the ceiling fan, brooms, and mops. He had a huge record collection he poured nasty bong water on just to ruin the cardboard sleeves. Like, yeah, this is clearly a very classy guy. In his fury, he left his modem. Now, I work in IT and quickly became aware that when you owe money to the internet service provider, you cannot cancel your account. A few days later, he texted me asking if he left the modem, but I told him I had no idea where the modem was. Maybe he destroyed it while having his rampage. Now, we were not on an unlimited data plan, so my plan was to open my laptop every day and open up a high-definition 4K video and then just close my laptop and let the video run all day. Well, I think I got maybe 5 months of free internet. It was kind of a running joke every night after work, wondering if it was going to be the day he finally shut down the account. And at this point in my life, I'm just curious how many gigabytes of internet he had to pay for, which is all really because of a closed laptop streaming high-definition content all day. Because trust me, this guy absolutely deserved it. Holy crap, your roommate sounds like a piece of work. Instead of hiring movers or, I don't know, making some friends, this guy literally destroyed everything instead of moving it. Like, dude, what is going on right now? Why not just sell it yourself or something like that? Or leave it on the curb or like donate it? I'm sure there's some service available that'll be like, oh yeah, we'll come by and pick it up. Like, don't destroy stuff. Like, what's going on right now? It's no one's fault that he didn't pay rent on time except for himself. He's an idiot. So I personally love what the original poster did. This guy decided to be super petty, and I love that kind of energy. Because from the sounds of it, this crappy roommate deserved to get knocked down a peg or two, even if that involved his wallet in the process. Am I the jerk for what happened on my family vacation after my brother's wife became incredibly controlling, trying to dictate what we could and could not do on our vacation? Here's how it went down. Okay, I want to start off by saying that for privacy reasons, this post will be a throwaway account, and all names are fake in this story. Anyways, last month I went on a family vacation that was planned by my brother Eric and his wife Natalie. It was meant to be a chill week at a cabin by the lake, with me, Eric, Natalie, and our youngest sister Jessica, as well as our parents coming along too. From the very start, Natalie was particular about how the trip should go. She created a full itinerary, color-coded Google Docs, meal planning charts, even mandatory tech-free hours. Now, I get that people like structure, but this was less of a vacation and more like a summer camp with a drill sergeant. Jess and I brought it up gently to Eric, saying that maybe Natalie could tone it down just a little bit, but he brushed us off and said she worked really hard on planning and that we should appreciate her effort. So I thought to myself, okay, fine, let's see how it goes. Well, fast forward to day 2 of the trip, and Natalie gets visibly upset. And this is all because we missed the scheduled group kayaking time. But it's like we were literally sitting on the porch having wine and laughing with our dad. Later, she snapped at Jess for bringing a Bluetooth speaker because apparently it ruined the ambiance, and glared at me for checking my phone. By day 4, Jess and I were completely over it. So we decided to accidentally sleep in through the morning hike and instead made a pancake breakfast with our mom. Natalie walked in, looked around, and just said, wow, so I guess the schedule doesn't matter anymore. Eric then pulled me aside and said I needed to stop undermining his wife. At that point, I was tired of the passive aggressiveness, so I told him point blank that his wife was sucking the joy out of the trip, and even Jess backed me up. Eric then got really defensive and said we were acting like entitled teenagers who couldn't handle a bit of structure. Well, Natalie cried that night and ended up leaving early. Ever since then, neither of them have spoken to me or Jess, and our mom is now trying to play mediator. She said that Natalie feels deeply disrespected and that we owe her an apology, but honestly, I think Natalie was being completely overbearing and treating us like kids at a retreat she was leading. So am I the jerk for not following the schedule and basically refusing to participate in Natalie's over-the-top vacation plans? Because right now I'm still incredibly pissed off. Oh no, there's no way you're the jerk. I think Natalie's a narcissist and a complete loser, and the fact that she's trying to be like, oh wow, the schedule doesn't matter anymore, does it? And I just want to be like, no, not when you're gonna act like this. It's one thing to have plans set in place where it's like, okay, we could do this at this time, but to sit there and micromanage everybody's vacation and act like some kind of dictator is just so annoying in my opinion. And yeah, after 4 days of that, I would be over it too. Like, there's nothing wrong with having a pancake breakfast with mom or drinking wine on the porch with your dad. Like, seriously, get a life, lady. Just because people don't stick to the schedule doesn't mean it's a shot at you. Just because you made this your entire personality doesn't mean everybody else is gonna do the same. So no, you don't owe anybody an apology, and if anything, Natalie owes you an apology, because like you said, she was overbearing and treating you like children, and that is absolutely unacceptable. An entitled Karen neglects her stupid kid, allowing him to swing on the handrails at the theme park I work at, forcing me to put all of them in their place. Here's what happened. Okay, so I want to share my experience of working at a very popular theme park in Florida, a magical rat planet of sorts if you know what I mean. This happened during my time working in attractions. I was in a position called Cell. I heard they no longer have that position after the first attraction remodeled. Anyways, the position was simple. Basically, all 3 lines, Fast Pass, Standby, and Single Rider all stopped there, and Cell would separate them into 2 rooms where they would watch a stylized video that explained the ride before they made it to the grouper who would place them in the ride itself. The two rooms had waiting areas, rows 1 and row 2, in front of the doors separated by metal handrails. Often children and surprisingly some adults would hang on the rails. Now, a few times people were injured by falling off, so this was prohibited. We basically had a spiel where we would say, for your safety and the safety of those around you, please don't sit, stand, or swing on the handrails. Thank you. On this particular day, I was with a new guy that would later become a good friend. It was extremely busy, and I was the cell while the new guy watched and learned. I separated two large groups into the waiting area after I closed the doors for the two groups that had entered the video rooms. Well, as usual, a few people and a kid around 10 years old started sitting and hanging on the handrails. So I did the speech in my very professional and polite voice, and the adults got off the rails, but the kid remained. I then stared for a few moments at him and his mom and his grandma, but he remained sitting and swinging, so I said the speech again. But still, nothing happened. The mom and grandma continued laughing with one another, while the kid continued playing on the rails. I then did this speech 2 more times, and the other guests were all staring at them silently. It was weird because they simply didn't notice 150 eyes all on them just looking like, wait a second, what are you doing? After the 4th time with the speech, I was irritated, so I walked over and I sternly said, get down. The little boy nearly jumped from his skin and immediately got down, running to his mom. I walked back over to the cell console and the new guy was trying not to laugh when the mom stormed over angrily, red in the face. She said to me, hey, that was rude. You could have at least said please. But I just remained quiet for a few seconds, because if I spoke at that time, something ignorant would have slipped out. So after I relaxed my thoughts, I replied sternly, please go back to row 1, please. Now she seemed really shaken up, but eventually walked away, which was only after a semi-lengthy stare between the two of us. But at this point, the new guy simply couldn't hold it in anymore and he started laughing. And after that, we became great friends for many years because this situation was completely stupid. Oh man, I always love it when parents who are completely irresponsible for their kid try to act like saying please is somehow going to make their idiot kid get off the rails. Because what's going to happen is that kid's going to get hurt, and then they're going to blame everybody else but themselves for not taking care of their kid and being like, hey, get off the handrail, idiot. Like, these are the type of parents who would absolutely sue the theme park and be like, oh, this is your fault somehow. My kid cracked his head open because you didn't say anything. So yeah, good for you for putting them in their place, because this is some stupid behavior. Today, I messed up by allowing human resources to hire a guy I dated once. And now that he's my boss, he is making my life a living nightmare. And at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what's going on. Okay, for a bit of context, I'm not good at remembering faces, especially the faces of people I only went on a date with once. Early in my college career, me and my current boyfriend had a rough patch and were broken up. After a few months of going through the 5 stages of grief with my friends, they advised me to do what any lonely and sad girl would do, and that is go on Tinder. I do just that, and after a string of mixed experiences, I matched with my future boss. He was an odd, nervous fellow, mostly the type to ask a string of questions and not add much else. Apparently we had some classes together, hence why he was excited to match with me, but I didn't really vibe with him. So after the date, I politely told him that I wasn't entirely interested. He pushed on asking me why, and I said I was gonna put a hold on dating for now and just focus on myself. Well, at least that was my original plan. Life happens, and my boyfriend and I reconciled like a week after that last date in a very romantic way. He starts walking me to class again, and then suddenly I get a very long and bitter text from my last date. I didn't spend too much time reading it and just promptly deleted the text and I blocked him. Well, fast forward to the present, and the last boss at my company quit. I was offered his position, but I wasn't quite ready for it. So they put out the position to the wider job market. And wouldn't you know it, my date from years ago applies. He seemed good on paper, having all the credentials and personality to fit the company culture, but then I messed up. He told me that we knew each other. I should have probably looked deeper into that statement before moving forward with him, but honestly, I just wanted the manager responsibilities off my back. Unfortunately, I only remembered who he was when I found his cell phone number on my block list. And now, with him as my boss, he's making my work life unbearable. He dismisses every advice or statement I make, he gives me impossible deadlines, and recently at our 4th of July party, he had the gall to imply that I missed out for picking the wrong guy to date. And it's like, bro, the only mistake I made was giving you the time of day in the first place. But don't worry, I'll get human resources on your butt soon enough. And trust me, you will absolutely regret it. Okay, I have got to repeat what someone else said in the comment section, because they pretty much hit the nail on the head. This is the definition of a hostile work environment. Like, dude, there is absolutely no excuse for this kind of crap. This guy really comes in here and says, oh man, you should have gone with me. You should have dated me instead of your other boyfriend. And then this guy's supposed to be your boss? Like, what's going on right now? This is so unbelievably awful and just so disgusting. Because seriously, what kind of point is this guy making? He's trying to be like, oh, you should have gone with me. But if this is how you're acting, then trust me, the original poster definitely dodged a train. Like, can you imagine being with this guy all the time? Like, that would be a nightmare, bro. There's no way I would ever want to put up with that. So yeah, it is kind of a mess up, but honestly, I think human human resources is gonna see that you are not the problem here, because what this guy's doing is very unprofessional and completely inappropriate. An entitled Karen causes chaos at a children's museum as she literally releases all the toddlers out of their daycare facility in some kind of stupid attempt to find her kids, causing all of these toddlers to run out of the facility and all over the museum. She then got so aggressive that she ended up getting banned for life from this facility, as she literally tried to blame everybody but herself. Here's what happened. To start things out, our town has a children's museum. It's incredibly cute and it's full of activities from babies all the way until you're about 9 years old or so. Now, the baby and toddler areas have gates that latch for obvious reasons. Well, this entitled Karen decided that she would use authority to have her toddler leave. So she opens the toddler gate and tells her child it's time to leave right now. Well, her kid doesn't move and clearly wants to stay and play. Instead of closing the gate, retrieving the toddler, and just going on with life, Karen decided to hold the gate open and start demanding that her toddler listen. So of course, other toddlers book it out, and Karen continues to hold the gate open and does nothing to prevent this, and just keeps yelling at her kid. Well, when this happened, there is instant chaos as parents and grandparents are scrambling to catch their escaped toddlers. These little kids are running to the open elevators. They're running to the balconies, the manager's office, and my child was booking it towards the stairs. I'm about to catch her when she ducks into the art room, and I notice a toddler nearly to the stair landing, which are like 2-story and made of stone, glance quickly and see grandma going as fast as she can, but nowhere near fast enough. So I leave my kid for just a second to snatch up this kid and deliver him to a grateful grandma. I then hear dad say, "Close the gate," as he has one twin in surfboard meltdown and another has just booked it out of the gate towards me and the paint room. This Karen then yells at him that it's not her job to watch his kid and that she's got 3 kids of her own to handle. Meanwhile, she's still holding open the gate. I'm now acting as a shepherd of sorts between the toddlers and the stairs. There's now paint everywhere, with unsupervised toddlers not wearing their paint-proof smocks going absolutely hog wild. With this sudden chaos, a manager came to see what was happening, and 2 dads point to the Karen who finally picked up her child and shut the gate. The Karen then tells the manager how she felt unsafe. That man was yelling at me to close the gate, and it was here that she demanded actions. By then, I had my kid in my arms, as all the other toddlers are corralled, and me and grandma back up the dads and say how irresponsible her behavior was. Karen then launches into a tirade, saying that it's not her job to watch all of our children. The manager then tells her that she's banned, so she then starts screaming. So security gather her and her 3 kids and march them out. But I really feel bad for the kids because honestly, how entitled do you have to be? She could have simply said, "I'm sorry, I froze when the kids ran out. I wasn't thinking straight." Literally anything, but instead she wanted to act like she was a victim of some kind of unsafe environment after she released half a dozen toddlers into dangerous situations. And honestly, I'm still blown away by this. Wow, you've got to be really stupid to let something like this happen. Seriously, this is just absolutely uncalled for. Not only did she put like all these other kids at risk of falling down the stairs or just blatantly getting hurt, she tried to blame these other guys for being hostile towards her. But it's like, lady, you're literally opening up Pandora's box and you refuse to close it. Either walk in and get your stupid kids or close the gate and wait for them to come to you. Like, it's not that hard, dude. What are you doing? So I think it's great that she got banned from that place because she is clearly irresponsible and you definitely do not want her around kids. Am I the jerk for telling my dad to pay for his own holidays after he literally has shown my entire life that he favors my brother way more than he favors me? Here's what's going on. Okay, so my dad has always favored my brother, which has been clear in how he supports him and celebrates his successes. I could go on for days with many examples, but here's a pretty big one. When my brother gets good news, my dad gets emotional and often teary-eyed. In contrast, when I graduated university and hosted my dad abroad, he whispered to my mom that he regretted coming and he wished he stayed home because he thought the dinner was too expensive, our bed was uncomfortable, and our fridge smelled like kimchi. That comment really stung, especially because he didn't say this to me directly. Rather, I overheard him as I was about to fall asleep. This was at night and I was on the couch in the other room as I gave my parents our double bed. For a bit of context, my brother is lazy and only got his current job with help from my parents, which is in contrast because I moved out at 21, built an independent life, and I never asked for any financial help. Now, as I'm working on a business with my partner, my dad said to me, "If you ever want to gift us a holiday or a car, don't feel like you need to spend too much money," because he really often assumes that we'll pay him. But I responded back by saying, "You can pay for your own holidays. You've got a job, right?" Which now leaves me feeling really bad. So honestly, am I the jerk for the way I responded to my dad? Because at this point, I'm honestly not sure if I made a mistake. Oh man, your dad is super toxic. It's obvious your brother's the golden child and you cannot do anything right. Which really sucks because like, dude, you hosted him abroad. You literally took care of him overseas. And this guy's trying to be like, "I regret showing up. The bed's uncomfortable and this place really sucks. Like, dude, this guy's an idiot. He is super ungrateful and obviously doesn't appreciate you the way that he appreciates his son. So no, you're not the jerk for saying, oh, you could pay for your own holidays. You've got a job, do it yourself. If I was in your shoes, I would have said the same thing, because your dad is clearly having favoritism and that is not fair for you in the slightest. An entitled Karen slapped me twice in the face while we were at a rock concert. So I decided to get some petty revenge by filling her purse up with some beer that she definitely didn't know about, leaving her stranded at the concert as she couldn't call herself an Uber. Here's how I did it. Okay, so this was years ago, but we went to a rock concert, and the crowd was energetic, but they were also cool to each other. It was mostly people in their 40s who were up and down on the floor, but there was no pushing and shoving. Everyone found their spot, and we were happy to enjoy the show. Well, the little miss thing that pushes away into the crowd starts telling people that they are too tall to be on the floor, purposefully dancing into people to get them to move. I mean, I think you know the type of person I'm talking about. Well, my friend and I made a little wall of ourselves to shield our wives from this idiot. She even tried to shove me aside and said my wife was her friend. Well, this entitled Karen's wild dancing and flailing caused her hand to hit me in the face, where she then stepped on my feet multiple times, and 3 or 4 people told her to calm her crap down. A few minutes later, she hit me again, and as she turned her back to me to argue with someone else, I decided to get some petty revenge by dumping most of a very large beer into her purse. The 3 ladies behind us saw this and gave me the thumbs up and just laughed. Well, about 20 minutes later, the entitled Karen reached into her purse to get her phone and instead found a beer soup. She tried to yell at people, but I indicated my beer can was full and turned my back. She then tried to get security involved, but they all just laughed at her. After the show, she was outside begging someone to call her an Uber since her phone wouldn't work. And maybe this was a bit too far, but honestly, it seemed justified at the time. Okay, dude, if you're gonna be at a concert and you're gonna be this obnoxious, then congratulations, you get to deal with whatever happens to you. Like, I'm serious, this is so uncalled for. You're disturbing people, you're pushing people aside, you're slapping people in the face, and you're stepping on feet. At that point, I'm sorry, but it really seems like you want to get in trouble. You want someone to yell at you, and you want to have some kind of repercussion go your way, because this behavior is super obnoxious, and honestly, just go find somewhere else to dance, instead of bothering people who literally want nothing to do with you.
I made my wife think that I was cheating on her, but I wasn't, I never have, and it was all part of the plan. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. I hope you've got some time and a snack because this one is going to be long, as the events that follow span from late 2019 to last week. So here's the backstory. My soon-to-be ex-wife was my high school sweetheart. We started dating in 1992 when we were both only 17. We're both 45 years old now. We've been together ever since. She's the only woman I have ever been with in my entire life. We married 5 years later at 22, fresh out of college. A year later, we had our first of 2 children, both boys, 22 and 17 years old. 23 years I gave to her. I built her a house, worked my butt off to give her the life she wanted. Sure, we had rough patches, but what marriage doesn't? Even in the worst of times, we found a way to pull through and come out the other side better, which made the discovery of her affair that much more jarring. Flashback to March of 2020, when I got the first feeling that something was off. For a good 2 months prior, we were in a funk. I was on the mend from reconstructive knee surgery. I blew out my ACL in fall of 2019, but still lacked in movement. At the time, I only had about 55% range of motion in my knee. This took a toll on quite a lot in the house. I was out on workers' comp as I had been injured on the job, and I was unable to do my usual household duties, so a lot got backed up. My sons would do what they could, but tasks that only I was capable of doing had to be put on the back burner, or my wife had to do them, which she wasn't pleased with. Things also crawled to a standstill in the bedroom between us. It had already slowed down prior to my injury, but in the state I was in at that time, it completely stopped. During these months, she, we'll call her Sue, was spending more time, quote, hanging with coworkers after work. Between November of 2019 and March of 2020, it was a regular occurrence for her. Naturally, I thought nothing of it. I've never, in the 23 years I've been with her, had any reason to worry or to not trust her. She has her friends, I have mine, and we have mutual friends. I'd go hang out with my friends all the time, and there was no issue. It was all above board. It was around January of this year that I noticed something odd. Sue started getting noticeably distant with me. Sure, we were in a funk, but she'd never deny me affection to that point. The usual hugs and kisses she'd give me came to a halt. Her phone was attached to her hand long before my suspicion grew, but she'd always share and show me things she'd discovered on the web. DIY ideas and recipes on Pinterest, memes, all kinds kinds of stuff. But she was now being guarded about her phone. Even her interactions with me became more snippy, as if she couldn't be bothered. So we're now in March. COVID has arrived and New York City is locked down. Our chosen careers fall under the essential designation, so neither of us have to work from home. I'd just been recently cleared to return to work after 5 months on the shelf, and I was eager to get back after it, as 5 months on my butt rehabbing my knee and not being able to do physical stuff drove me nuts. For context, I enjoy physical activities. I am an avid martial artist, and I typically am in the gym 4 days a week on top of all the home projects I did. Within a week or two of lockdown, my soon-to-be ex-wife alerts me that she's going to have to start putting in extra hours. Again, I think nothing of this because of her field. Of course, I was under the assumption that it'd be every other day, but no, it was every day. And not just an hour or two, she'd come home 3 or more hours later, go straight to the shower, spend a little time with me, a little time with our 17-year-old, the 22-year-old lives with his girlfriend across town, and then go to bed. As I'm able to support myself on my knee better, we start getting intimate again. But as you'd probably guess, she wasn't mentally or emotionally present for it, which I noticed quickly. So by early April, the picture started getting clearer to me. All of the signs were pointing to the idea that she was having an affair. That's when I decided I needed to find answers. So I scoured the internet on things I should be looking for, signs of infidelity in one's partner, and sure enough, she was pretty much ticking all of the boxes on such behavior. So then my search inquiry advanced to how I find proof. It started with her social media. Looking at her Facebook entries from months prior, it's pretty much the usual. Pictures of us and our sons, pictures with her and her friends, and more than a few pictures of her nights out with co-workers. In these pictures, it's a mixed bag of her closest friends from work and a couple of folks who I've never met from her work. But I see one recurring thing in a number of these pictures. One guy. In every picture he's in, he's rather uncomfortably close to her. His arm is around her shoulder or his hand on her lower back. Way too close for a guy I've never personally met. Needless to say, that put a sour taste in my mouth. But that wasn't the worst of it. No. The worst part was the fact that apparently this dude is a friend of hers on Facebook and follows her on Instagram. So I go look up his Facebook account and wouldn't you know it, I'm blocked. Why the heck am I blocked from seeing this guy's Facebook account? But he's friends with her on Facebook. Yep, now I'm in Batman detective mode. At that point, I wasn't even trying to deny it. I knew she was cheating on me with this guy. My mission was to find out for how long. And over the course of April and May, that's what I did. You know, I never had any clue the depth of information you could secure from a phone, text, and email records up until then. We have a family plan cell phone package, and I was able to pull up quite a bit of data. My soon-to-be ex-wife's data history was telling. The 2 most frequent numbers she had interacted with from October of 2019 to April of 2020 was my mom and a number that I've never seen before. Take a wild guess whose number it was. A quick check on Google, and I confirmed it was the dude from the photos who blocked me on Facebook. We'll call him POS because that's what he is. Again, the picture becomes even clearer at this point, but a lot of their messages and texts were disjointed, which meant she was deleting a lot of them. I knew she was cheating on me with this guy, but nothing in the data could serve as a smoking gun. I needed more evidence. It's at this point that I tell my best friend Oz what I had found. He asked me, did I confront her with what I had? And I said no because I felt like it wasn't enough. That's when he told me about an app that I could download to apparently spy on her communications in real time. I won't say the name as I don't know the rules on that here. I got it installed, synced up to my data plan, and waited. Within days of doing so, I finally saw it. A text string between the two of them talking about how much fun they'd had the previous night and making plans to do it again that weekend. Boom. Gut punch. To say that I was completely devastated was an understatement. I guess that moment counts as my D-Day, and for the next 2 days after, I was just broken. I actively distanced myself from her those 2 days immediately after D-Day, which she was noticeably shaken by. She tried to console me and ask me what was wrong, but I'd brush it off and leave her presence. I couldn't even look at her. This woman who I gave 23 years of my life to, who I have given everything I could and more to as a husband, and she stepped outside of our marriage for a guy just 5 years older than our eldest son. By the 3rd day, I wasn't even sad anymore. anymore. I was pissed. I contacted Oz to let him know my suspicion was confirmed, and he asked me if I had confronted her yet. My answer was no, and I told him that I wanted payback. I didn't want to just divorce her. I wanted to destroy her. I wanted to leave her life in shambles and ruin her. It was going to take time to do so I devised a plan. In my readings and research on infidelity, I had saw a quote that resonated with me that went, "The enemy of infidelity is unpredictability," or something to that ilk. That was going to be the basis of my plan. I was going to make her life hell on wheels, while also secretly planning my exit strategy. So we're now in early June and I've still got the app installed. Pretty much every night I'm gathering as much data as I can, seeing their back and forth messages. They're talking like it's a full-blown relationship they're in. Texting, lovely, dopey, romantic stuff. Exposed images of each other, the whole bag. At that point, I had stopped looking at any of it. I was just collecting information and cataloging on my private FPS server. Meanwhile, I start doing things out of the ordinary. I start going out at odd times. I start coming home even later than she does. In her presence, I'm on my phone a lot more than the usual, and when she asks, "What are you up to?" I just simply say, "Just stuff," and put my phone away. I'd also changed my login information on everything so she couldn't access any of my stuff. Mind you, for our entire marriage, we've never hid anything from each other. But right around, I'm assuming the start of her affair, she changed her password on Facebook as well as on her phone, stating that she, quote, had to because of the security breaches in recent months. Yeah, really nice cover for hiding your affair from your husband. Anyway, I clued Oz in on my plan, as well as telling my older and only sister and two more of my closest friends as to what was going on. These are people I trust my life with, and I swore them to secrecy. For context, Oz and I have been friends since we were kids. The other of our friends, Joey and Nina, we've known since high school. Make note of Nina, she comes into play down the road. July comes and my soon-to-be ex-wife is in full paranoia mode. She's texting and calling me a lot more frequently now, asking me if I'm going to be home when she gets home. When am I coming home? While she is, and I'm not, asking me what I'm up to, the works. I can see the seed planted in her head the month prior is starting to sprout, especially in her communication with POS. She's confiding in him about her doubt and confusion, telling him that I'm getting cold and distant. The nerve of this woman. In the interim of these interactions with POS, she suggests that maybe they should stop meeting up at our house because she has no idea if I'd just show up, confirming that yes, she's had this jerk in my home. Thanks, Sue. POS asks her in that specific communication, was she worried about me potentially cheating on her? Which actually pissed her off. I can't even begin to describe the level of joy and how many laughs I got out of reading that exchange. My cheating wife arguing with her affair partner over if she's mad her husband could be cheating on her. Oh, the irony. Now, bear in mind, I'm not hooking up with anyone. When I leave, I'm usually at Oz or Joey's, throwing back some brewskis, watching fights, and spending time with my bros, or at my big sister's house hanging with her and my brother-in-law, who's like an older brother to me. My sister is 52 and her husband is 58. She had told him about my soon-to-be ex-wife's infidelity, but not of my plan. Couldn't risk it as he's a bit of a blabbermouth. Well, fast forward now to October. That's when things seriously pick up. I've been in my faux affair for 3 months now, and Sue is hyper aware of the fact that I'm actively pulling away from her. It's been as long as the day I enacted my plan until the day she confronted me on October 20th, 2020, that I'd even touched her. No hugs, no kisses, no initiation of intimacy, nothing. Not like she needed it. She was still doing POS just at his place or at motels. So that afternoon, she calls me at work, which wasn't rare before all of this, but certainly hadn't happened in a while, and asks me to come straight home after work, saying that she had, quote, something important to tell me. I'm not gonna lie to you all, I half believed she was gonna come clean about her infidelity, but she of course didn't. Instead, I get home to her asking me, was I unhappy with her? The absolute nerve. She cites the fact that I've been spending way too much time away from home. I didn't show her any affection anymore, and our bedroom life has completely died. She tells me she's worried that I'm pushing her away because I was resentful of how she treated me the months I was rehabbing my knee. And then came the punchline. She asked if I was cheating on her. Folks, I fell on the floor laughing hysterically. And when I say hysterically, I mean Joker laughing gas hysterical. On the surface, it looked like, to her, assuming, it was me laughing at the notion of being unfaithful, but it was of course actually me laughing at the sheer irony of what was happening in front of my eyes. I'm tearing up, pounding on the floor in complete hysterics for a good 2 minutes before I compose myself enough to answer. I sit up and look her in the eyes for the first time in months, shaking my head. I don't give her an answer. I stand up, brush myself off, kiss the top of her head, and go about settling in for the night. Later that night, as I'm in my office, I decide, you know what? Given the brevity of what happened, I wanted to see what she was telling him. So I fire up the app, and sure enough, they're actually texting in real time. She tells POS,
I know he's cheating on me. I asked him tonight and he literally laughed in my face. He fell on the floor and laughed for like 5 minutes.
It wasn't 5 minutes, obviously.
He doesn't even care how I feel anymore. I don't know how or why, but he is gone. I know I've lost him. This is karma. I know it.
The smile I had on my face reading that must have resembled a Cheshire cat. She was breaking. POS attempted to console her, saying that if I cared enough for her, she wouldn't have come to him to give her what I wasn't giving her. But the tone of her responses told me that she was having doubt now. She had the nerve to step out of our marriage because I was unable to fulfill my role as a husband due to a legitimate injury, and kept the affair going for, at that point, nearly an entire year. But the idea of her losing me to another woman was enough to make her waver? What a weakling. Now, during all of this, I was also extracting the second part of my plan for payback, getting all of my affairs in order financially. In September, I had met with a family attorney to get the ball rolling on divorce papers. With the mountain of evidence I've piled up to that point, New York is an at-fault state as far as divorce, and the overwhelming amount of proof that I'd gathered by displaying Sue's infidelity pretty much solidified I could nail her to the wall in a divorce case. My lawyer instructed me to get all of my financials in order in preparation for whatever division of assets might come as a result. I went one better than that, secretly pulling all of my money out of our joint account and putting it into my personal account. I also started shopping around for an apartment as a part of phase 2. We're now in November and I've not changed my behavior. In fact, I've ramped it up. This is where my friend Nina comes into play. For context, Nina and Sue have never been what you would call close. I met Nina freshman year of high school, 2 years before I met Sue. Even way back then, Sue has seen Nina as a threat, as she's my closest female friend. There's always been an implied, I don't trust her from Sue regarding Nina. She's never addressed it directly, but it's obvious to anyone who pays attention. Conversely, Nina has never been a big fan of Sue. Early in me and Sue's relationship, Nina called attention to me how Sue was pretty much imposing herself into our little square of friends, whereas I didn't do the same with Sue's set of friends. That irked Nina because she knew why Sue was doing it. Her. Among Sue's circle, even now, there are no male friends aside from POS, whereas Nina is the only girl in my square. Nina has been stuck overseas due to the virus and finally returned to New York City on November 3rd. Oz, Joey, and I decided we are going to celebrate her return with a night at Joey's house for dinner and drinks. There was only 5 of us: Oz, Joey, Joey's wife, who was also Nina's sister, Nina, and myself. Sticking to CDC guidelines, we take the Rona very seriously. Nina, being the evil mastermind she is, comes up with an evil idea to trigger Sue. She suggested we take some photos in the same vein of the photos that I discovered of Sue and POS months prior and post them to my Facebook, and that's just what we did. It wasn't until the 5th that Sue got wind of it, as I'm guessing a few friends noticed my updates and saw how uncomfortably close I was with Nina. This really messed with her mind because she still believed that I was cheating, and I can almost guarantee she wanted to accuse Nina, but she knew that Nina had been stuck in Europe for the majority of the year. Still didn't stop her from attempting to dress me down that night for being so, as she said, handsy in the pictures. I saw this as a golden opportunity to deliver the lead jab for my knockout blow. I say, so what about the pictures with you and POS from last year? He was pretty handsy in them, but did you see me get bent out of shape over it? Deer in headlights. It was the first time I even mentioned the dude's name throughout all of this. The hamster wheel in her head started reeling in real time as she tried to explain away those pictures. To that point, she hadn't even known that I saw them. That's how little I use Facebook. When I actually do post something, it's like an event to people, which is why the pictures with Nina specifically got so much traction among our circles. And explain away she did.
He's that way with everyone. He's just a really friendly guy. I can see how it looks, but there's nothing there. I'm sorry if those pictures hurt you. I'll delete them.
No, the pictures aren't what hurt me. The year that you've been doing the dude whilst lying to me that you're working extra hours and hanging with friends is what hurt me. But vengeance, as Lieutenant Commander Worf from Star Trek The Next Generation so famously said, is a dish best served cold. From that night, Sue was being extra specially clingy and attentive to me, like annoyingly so. She's trying to initiate affection and intimacy with me, and I'd stonewall her at every chance. All the while, I'm still archiving everything she says to POS. Mind you, by this point, I'd long since gone numb. Any desire I might have had to save my marriage was dead. I checked out the day I enacted the first phase of my plan. She's confiding in him that I've gotten worse, that she doesn't know what to do, and she feels like I absolutely hate her. I do. Then comes the bombshell. She says she can't see him anymore. The guilt is too much for her, and she feels like karma is suffocating her. She can't risk losing me. She says that she loves POS deeply, but she's still in love with me, and she has to save her marriage before she loses me. No, my dear, you're about 8 months too late for that. POS loses his mind saying such lovely things as, he doesn't love you the way I love you, and you're making a mistake. You can't just throw me away like this. That text chain would be the last thing they'd have until about 3 weeks ago. Throughout the remainder of November into December, Sue is stuck in limbo. She's been trying to gauge where my headspace is and is still unable to tell if I'm actually being unfaithful. Meanwhile, POS is steadily blowing up her phone daily, but she's not responding to him. I'd see her check her phone often and then quickly put it away. Meanwhile, phase 2 of the plan was now officially complete. The divorce papers were done. I'd found me a studio apartment in Co-op City. New Yorkers will know the area, and I signed a 2-year lease on it. All of my money was in my personal account. I was ready to throw my haymaker. So, we're now at Thanksgiving. My oldest and his girlfriend were hosting a small gathering of our immediate families. So them, oldest and his girlfriend, oldest girlfriend's parents, she's an only child, myself, Sue, and our youngest. We have a great night. My oldest's girlfriend is studying to be a chef, and she did all the cooking herself. This girl can cook, let me tell you. As I had to keep up appearances of nothing being wrong between Sue and I initiated affection with her several times that evening. Kisses on the cheek, cute little hugs, wrapping my arms around her shoulder from behind. The gestures didn't go unnoticed by her, as she reveled in it. Bear in mind, this was the first time I touched this woman since I kissed the top of her head the night that she confronted me in October, so just about 2 months. Not gonna lie, I felt repulsed by doing it, but I had to. I couldn't risk the plan. And me being distant to her in the face of my boys and my oldest girlfriend and her parents would set off alarms. So my youngest decides he wants to stay over with his big brother for the night, so Sue and I head home. On the drive home, she thanks me for being so good to her and says,
I don't know what you're going through, baby, but I'm here for you.
I just had to hold off busting out into maniacal laughter again, but I responded saying, I know, I just need time. So for the first time realistically since springtime, we did the deed that night. I figured, why not? With what I'm about to do, I may as well get some action before I delete her from my existence. I won't go into detail, but it wasn't lovemaking. When I was finished, she was a lump of flesh laying there trying to figure out the direction of the truck that ran her over. No cuddling or anything after. I just got up, showered, and went to sleep in my office. To her confusion though, I used protection. The first time in 2 decades I did. She was definitely perplexed by it, but she didn't ask questions. I sure as heck wasn't going to go raw knowing what she'd been up to with POS for months at that point. I wake up the next day and check my handy dandy spy app for the first time in weeks. She responded to POS. Dude went full novella. He professed his love for her, said she was wasting her time trying to rekindle a flame in me that died, that she'd been in a prison with me for 23 years and deserved to experience the love and affection of a man who would cherish her. Mind you, this dude is 27 years old, 5 years older than our oldest son, and he's that sprung on a 45-year-old married mother of 2? What a grade A high quality simp. And what happens next is the most intense nuclear revenge you can imagine, but that is in part 2, which will be the very next video here on the channel. By the time you're watching this, it's probably already out and linked at the top of the description, so check the link at the top of the description, and if for some reason it's not, subscribe and and hit the bell to turn on notifications so you don't miss it. How do you betray someone that you've put your trust in for 23 years? And they've put their trust in you. Did she just get so used to him that she doesn't see him as being something special or remarkable, and she just assumed that he'd always be there since he had always been there? If she ever loved him at any point during these 23 years, why wouldn't she at least break up with him before doing all of this? Yes, it would be painful, but nothing like what she put him through, where she would ultimately get found out anyway. I feel like most things like this in life end up bubbling to the surface no matter what happens, so you're trying to be sly and sneaky and think you're gonna get away with it. It seems like most of the time that ends up not being the case. Eventually, it will come out, and I'm sure some part of her deep down knew that, even if she doesn't realize it in this moment. It's kind of surprising to me that he so quickly chose to go down this route of making her think that she was being cheated on also, by him, the OP. But I get what he's trying to do. He's trying to dig the knife deeper and twist it so that he creates some sort of infighting between POS and her. But the one thing a lot of people seem to not agree with is the whole spy app thing. So that's my question to you. Do you think the spy app was going too far, or is it somehow justified in this situation? And of course, jerk or not a jerk, and why? My wife cheated on me with a guy that's basically the same age as our son. So I enacted nuclear revenge. I completely ghosted her, vanished from her life like Houdini after 23 years of marriage. But what she did in response to that gets a lot darker. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. She chose to blow up our marriage and destroy the home we'd built for this dude, pretty boy with a soft side. Ha. She responded saying pretty much the same thing she said when they last talked, that she loves him and enjoyed their time together, but she can't lose me. I'm still the love of her life, but she'll always have a place for him in her heart. That they can still be friends if he chooses, but the physical relationship between them is over. He begged her to see him one last time, and yep, you guessed it, she said yes. One more for the road, right? Who am I to say anything? That's what I did to her the previous night. Of course, I added all of that to the archive I'd compiled. December 4th is when Phase 3, the final phase of Operation Shinobi Ghost, started. The divorce papers were in hand. My new place of residence was set up. Now I had to start slowly moving my stuff out of the house. But first, I had to break the news to my boys. I called my oldest to the house that Friday night, had them join me in my office, and laid everything on that table. Not the specifics, but that their mother had been cheating on me for over a year, and I was going to be filing for divorce soon. My 17-year-old was especially shaken up by this because he himself had just recently experienced his first taste of infidelity. Yup, his first girlfriend had cheated on him just 4 months prior. Seeing his heart broken a second time at the idea that his own mother was capable of doing this hit him hard. My oldest took it a lot better and suggested taking his brother in to live with him until this blows over, to which I agreed. We packed up some of his stuff and he asked me if I was going to be okay. I told him, yes son, I'm going to be alright and so are you. We are going to be alright, I promise. And then they were off. The hardest part was now over and it was now time to arm the nukes. Over the next few weeks, day by day, Oz would help me get a little of my most sensitive stuff out of the house. Gave him a list of all the definite stuff to grab while Sue and I were at work and left him the spare key. This was all stuff Sue wouldn't notice was missing until you told her it was gone. I'd also gotten a new phone and a new phone number and told everyone who needed to know, Oz, Joey, Nina, my boys, Big Sis, and my mother, my new contact information. Meanwhile, I'm keeping up with the ruse with Sue and she's none the wiser, trickling bits and pieces of affection to her just to keep her off the trail, whilst she's still in contact with POS. Not to the extent that they had been prior, but there's still an emotional thing happening. The fog is faint, but it's still there. All the while, I gather everything, and I do mean everything. Every bit of data that I've archived since I started the plan, call logs, texts, pictures, emails, everything, and started making printouts. Folks, I must have spent over $1,500 on staple supplies. Printer ink, paper, binders, the works, and I cataloged everything in order from the beginning of the affair until the last bit 2 weeks ago, December 16th. All went to the binders, 14 of them. I then put each one in a box and gift wrap each, addressing them to various people. My mother, my father had passed away 7 years ago, her parents, her two sisters, her brother, her HR department. Did I forget to mention that POS works for the same company and there's an expressed rule against intercompany relationships because of the nature of what she does? Several of her friends, POS and POS's parents, lugged all of those things to the post office and shipped them all out December 16th, ETA for delivery December 22nd to 24th. Perfect. perfect. So now we're at Christmas Eve. Sue comes home around the usual time. No idea if she'd seen POS. I'd stopped tracking her on the app the 18th. I figure I'd gotten all the mileage I needed from it. As per usual, she showers, hangs out with me for a bit. I blow her back out on the living room couch. I know, I'm a jerk. And she turns in for the night. The final phase was upon me at long last. The nuke I've been arming since June was finally about to be launched. In the middle of the night, I woke up and wrapped 3 of the remaining binders with the divorce papers taped to the inside cover and set it on my side of the bed with a note that said Merry Christmas on it. Next to it, I left my old phone and the business card of my lawyer. I packed up the remainder of my most needed items, enough to fill 2 backpacks, and I left my home that I spent 23 years in for the last time. That, my friends, was 1 week ago. To Sue, I am completely off the grid, gone, shadow ghosted. She's blocked on Facebook, but hasn't blocked me for some reason, so I'm keeping tabs on the fallout. It's absolutely glorious. My packages have reached everyone I sent them out to, and Sue is getting crucified. Her youngest sister completely dressed her down. Both of her parents have condemned her. My mom absolutely destroyed her. Like, holy smokes. I know my mom has a mean streak, but the things she called Sue were unholy. She's been frantically trying to find out if anyone knows where I am, but those that do aren't saying a word. All over her Facebook feed, she's desperately trying to reach me because I'm guessing she knows I'm likely looking. But I'm not saying a word to her without my lawyer present. That'll be the next time I share oxygen with her. She's got no way of spinning the narrative to paint me as the bad guy because I've exposed her to everyone who matters to her. And from what a mutual friend who works in the same company as her told me, she and POS apparently are being put on administrative leave as of tomorrow. So yeah, chances are she'll be going into the next year unemployed. As for the final 2 binders, well, one has been turned over to my lawyer as my final bit of evidence for the impending divorce, and the last one I put in my storage unit to be burned in Joey's fire pit when the divorce is final. Do I feel guilty about this? No, not even in the slightest. 23 years I did right by this woman. I gave her the home she wanted. I gave her the family she wanted. I gave her the life I felt we both deserved, and I loved her unconditionally. Never have I faltered. Never have I strayed. Never have I even entertained the notion of breaking my vows. When an issue came up that I felt was affecting our marriage, I came to her and told her, and we sorted out best we could. She opted to find comfort in another man's bed, rather than come to me and say that she was unhappy with our bedroom life at the time. She decided to step out with a young punk who gave her the tingles. So no, I have no sympathy for what I did, or for her. She can burn in hell for all I care. The most I stand to lose is my house, a car, and maybe a couple $100 a month in alimony. But seeing as the divorce is filed under the statute of adultery and New York State is an at-fault state, that might end up getting waived with the insurmountable amount of evidence I've provided. As far as I'm concerned, she's dead to me and I'm never looking back. So am I the jerk? Jumping into the future, there is an update. Christmas Day was the first full day I spent in my new apartment. It's still a work in progress as I have more stuff I want to get, but overall I've made it my home, since I'm gonna be here for at least 2 years. My boys and the eldest girlfriend came over and spent a good portion of the day with me. The girlfriend brought over treats she'd made and also whipped up a really nice meal. I got to sit and talk with my sons in a way that I hadn't done in a really long time, and it was nice. My big sister also came over with more goodies and hung out with us also. It'd been the first time she'd seen her nephews in nearly a year. Having all of them around did me some real good. As if I were by myself, I think I would have just drank myself into a stupor. Everyone cleared out around 8ish and I decided I wanted to go hang out with Joey and his wife Claudia. Hung out with them for a couple of hours, had a couple drinks, and then went back home. The next big development that happened was last week. Around midday, I get a text from Nina asking if I was busy that night. I of course wasn't, so we agreed to meet up after I got off of work. She shows up and we go to a dinner not far from where I work. Here in New York City, we're doing indoor dining at 25% capacity thanks to the Rona, but there's mostly no trouble getting seats because so many of us opt not to dine out as much these days regardless. So after we're seated and order our food, Nina pretty much lays all of her cards on the table, and honestly, I knew this was coming. She basically confessed that she's liked me all the way back since we were teenagers, but never got the chance to tell me since Sue swooped in and scooped me up before she could. For context, I've known Nina longer than Sue by 2 years. As I mentioned, she's been on the fourth point of my social square of myself, Oz, and Joey. We were the social outcasts in high high school, the raver kids who didn't fit into all of the other cliques. Back then, Nina had a weight problem and was diabetic. She was the heavy-set goth chick who was super cool but no guy would ever give a second glance at. But we always had chemistry. These days, Nina is a personal trainer and a yoga instructor. She was the ugly duckling who grew up into one hell of a beautiful swan, if I must say. Long story short, we decided that upon the finalization of my divorce, we are going to start seeing each other. And yeah, I slept with her that night. Took her back to my new pad and we had a grand old time. Am I ashamed of sleeping with her? Heck no. Nina's been a better friend to me than Sue ever was. That's not saying Sue wasn't my best friend, but through near a quarter of a century I've known Nina, she's always supported me. Even so much as I learned that day, willingly taking a step back from her own feelings to allow me to pursue and eventually start a life with Sue. That resonated with me on a level I didn't think it would. That kind of selflessness towards another person is the definition of real love. I know, it sounds like I'm just trying to justify in my head that sleeping with her was the right decision. To me, it was. And I plan on exploring what's to come with Nina and I with total commitment. Okay, on to yesterday, the day I met my wife and her lawyer to discuss the divorce. It's now been 2 weeks since I ghosted my soon-to-be ex-wife. This past Monday, I got a phone call that Sue's attorney had scheduled a meeting for us to discuss the terms of our divorce, which was yesterday. I met with him Tuesday morning to discuss the terms I'm wanting. Long story short, it's an uncontested divorce under the grounds of marital neglect from Sue. My terms are full division of assets and me selling my half of the house ownership to her. She can have it. We keep our respective vehicles, I keep my cabin, and under the pretense of marital neglect, she gets no spousal support from me. As for 17, which is what I'll refer to my son as from here on, he's free to choose who he wants to reside with following the divorce, which will most likely be me. So Wednesday comes and I show up to my lawyer's office dressed in my Johnny Cash best. My wife and her lawyer, she looks like crap, barely holding it together. I give the stone face. I won't bore you with the lawyer babble, but her lawyer presented an offer for terms of reconciliation. I shot them down almost as soon as she finished listing the details of the request. Like I said, I'll spare you all the details of the meeting. Long story short, we agreed to a legal separation leading to an uncontested divorce. The only revision is that I will pay her $653 a month of temporary spousal support to cover the cost of utilities until she's gainfully employed again. Yep, she got fired for doing POS. He got canned as well. Up to a full year after the finalization. I make enough that it won't hurt me financially even if she drags her feet finding a new job. And she's got enough in her savings to live off of for quite some time. Once a full calendar year has passed after the finalization date of the divorce, she's on her own. A small price to pay to be rid of her and her cheating. It'll take roughly 3 months for things to go through, so early April if there's no lockups, I'll be free of her. So after the meeting, my lawyer gives me some final words before telling me he'll be in touch to update me on the progress of the filing. Back out on the street, Sue chases me down and asks if we can talk. I figured I'd at least give her that. She held it together fairly well in the meeting, but outside let the waterworks flow, saying how sorry she was and how she never meant for it to go as far as it did. She says she never expected to fall in love with POS, but knew when she thought I was cheating how wrong it was to betray her own husband in such a way. She asked if I could ever find it in my heart to forgive me, and that maybe in a few years we could try to start over, that she can't imagine what her life is going to be without me. I tell her start imagining it soon because this will be the last time I ever speak to or see her. I tell her that 17 is almost a man and old enough to make his own choices as to his own future. I say that I gave her half of my life and every ounce of love that I had unconditionally, and she, in her own words, fell in love with another man, that there is absolutely no chance of me forgiving her, that all the love I had for her was slowly killed all of those months when she confided and professed her love to POS rather than coming to me and telling me she had any issues with how things were going with us. I told her I loved who she once was, but I hate who stands before me, and that if I never see her again, it'll be too soon. Here we are on the sidewalk in Midtown Manhattan, her making a scene crying her eyes out. A couple of folks walk by and give side glances, but at that point, I didn't care. I wasn't about to publicly humiliate her. I pretty much already socially and professionally destroyed her, but I needed to get the last bit of emotion I had for her out. I finished by telling her that I didn't regret the 23 years I spent being her husband. I regretted that in 23 years, she decided the easy way out was the better option, and that for 23 years I thought she was mine, but it turned out it was just my turn. I put in my Raycons, turned around, and walked away. Later that night, her father calls me and apologizes. He praises me for always being a good man to his daughter, and tells me that he's ashamed of her and that he raised her better than what she did. I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna miss the old man. My dad died years ago, so he's always been my default father figure since, but I can't see myself maintaining a relationship with anyone on her side of the family. After that call, I went on Facebook and symbolically changed my relationship status to divorced. Yeah, it's not final yet, but in my eyes, it's over and done. Like I said, when I make a post on Facebook, it's an event, so plenty of folks started hitting me up over Messenger asking me questions, and I laid it all out. That I filed for divorce with Sue earlier in the day. Of course, Nina called me, shocked that I had pulled the trigger so fast. Obviously, I was already in the process of it when we spoke, but she had no way of knowing how far it was along. I asked her if she could come over, and of course, she comes a running. We knocked boots again, but this time, she stayed the night. We laid in my bed and talked until the wee hours of the morning, and I haven't felt this level of relief and connection in a really long time. Nina gets me, and I can't get enough being around her. Since the day she confided in me, she's all that's been on my mind. Yeah, I know, some folks are gonna say it's messed up that I moved on so fast, but as far as I'm concerned, my marriage ended the day POS let Sue touch his pecker, so I'm about due. So yeah, that's it. That's the end. My divorce is in the works and I'm moving on to start a relationship with Nina. I know in a common response to someone I said I'd probably never marry again, but that was before Nina came clean to me about how she felt towards me, and I can't deny that I feel the same. We're gonna take it slow, and we're not announcing anything until the divorce with Sue is legal and official. As for Sue, I couldn't give a care what happens to her. She could move POS into our old home for all I care. I'll be getting my money for the house over the course of the next year in 4 quarterly installments, and aside from the $653 I will pay out directly to her savings account monthly, I never have to see or speak to her again. Jumping into the future, there is an update. My soon-to-be ex-wife of 23 years just tried to end it last night. The quick version of the backstory is I discovered my wife of 23 years was having an affair with a 27-year-old coworker. We have 2 sons, 22 and 17. I concocted a plan to completely upend her life, centered around fooling her into thinking that I was having an affair myself. I kept the ruse going for over 4.5 months while compiling evidence of her infidelity, as well as securing divorce papers and planning my exit strategies, slowly moving my personal belongings from our home to a new apartment, getting a new phone and number, separating my half of our shared income from our joint account, etc. I gathered every bit of proof about her affair, compiled it, printed it all out from the very start to that week, filed it into 14 binders, packed 11 into gift wrap boxes, and mailed them to the most important people in her life, as well as her HR apartment, so that they would all arrive on Christmas Eve. While she slept, I took one of the remaining 3 binders and did the same. Only this one, I taped the divorce notice to the inside cover and left it on my side of the bed, which, mind you, she's had her lover in a number of times, along with my old phone and my lawyer's business card, and then shadow ghosted her. Then we went through all the divorce proceedings. This brings us to last night. As only my closest friends, 2 sons, older sister, and mother have my new contact information, I've completely blocked my soon-to-be ex-wife on all social outlets, so she has no means of reaching me since I left her on Christmas Eve, but some of our mutual friends still do. Last night I'm hanging out in my apartment and I get a voice call notification on Messenger from one of said friends, one of the few who hadn't abandoned her following me outing her affair. She didn't waste any time when I answered and said she had went to check on Sue, my soon-to-be ex-wife, and found her passed out in the bedroom, foaming out of the mouth with 2 bottles of empty pills next to her. She's in the ICU in critical but stable condition. The doctor said that she will likely pull through, but she's clearly not going to be well after. She begged and pleaded for me to come. Her parents and 2 of her sisters were also there at the hospital. My guess is they were notified after the hospital attempted to notify me, but Sue would still have my old number as her emergency contact. I simply told her no. Sue was not my problem anymore. She had clearly decided she wanted to take the easy way out rather than deal with the shame and agony of the 23-year marriage she blew up. I then told her friend that if Sue's family were there, they could help her sort out the pieces, but as far as Sue and I are concerned, there is no Sue and I anymore. I then ended the call. I've had a few hours to sleep on it, and my sons called me this morning asking if I knew. I told them yes, but I also let them know that if they want to be there and be supportive of their mother, I will not hold it against them or judge them for it. She is their mother after all. But I myself wash my hands of her and care little to nothing about what she does for or to herself anymore. They were both a little taken back by this, but respected my stance. However, now that the news has broken about her attempt, many of those friends who dropped her were all starting to surface again and saying that I needed to be there for her, that even despite what she did to me, I need to support her in her time of need. I've also been informed that her affair partner tried to visit her this morning but wasn't allowed because he's not family. I'm getting dogpiled on to go see her, but I feel nothing for this woman anymore. I haven't for a very long time. I checked out during the process of getting my payback for her betrayal, and I stand by the fact that I don't care at all for what she's done. In fact, it makes me hate her even more. She's the one who was unfaithful. She's the one who, through a year-long fling with a guy 5 years older than her oldest son, was worth destroying 23 years. And now that she has to face the consequences of her choices, she chooses the most selfish way to deal with it. Even now, seeing as she is in all likelihood going to survive, she's cultivated immediate sympathy from everyone who took her to task, and I'm being made out to look like the jaded ex-husband, unwilling to sympathize for her by most of her family. Not her dad. He's reached out to me over the last few hours and said he respects my decision to stay away. It's like I never even truly knew this woman. 23 years and it comes down to this. Yes, I know the way I broke things off with her may have put her in a poor mental state, but now a whole new can of worms has been opened up because either she had a complete mental breakdown and decided to self-delete herself, or she made an extremely risky and calculated move to cull favor back from people who just weeks prior condemned her for betraying me. She cheated on me and now she's the victim? Sorry if this comes off as rantish, but I'm here trying to wrap my brain around this. I want to be perfectly clear. I am not going to visit Sue. She waived her right to me caring about her well-being the day that she let POS put his worm inside of her. This might come off as heartless because despite the cool, calm, collected way I've been throughout my whole ordeal, my feelings are still very much raw, but I don't care about this woman. I haven't for a long time. I'm aware that I'm going to be vilified by a number of folk here. I don't much give a care. Think of me however you want. If you were in my shoes, you'd see her actions vastly different. Some of you folks are going to look up my history and see the story of what I did to her, and you're going to draw the conclusion that this was all my fault. That me tormenting her for all of those months, fooling her into thinking that I was cheating on her while she actively cheated on me, then destroying her socially and professionally as a result was the catalyst for her meltdown. Maybe it was. Maybe I'm a heartless sociopath. But as Arthur Fleck so famously said, you get what you deserve. I gave this woman half of my life and did absolutely everything to be the best possible husband she could ever have. By her own admission, I had no bearing in her decision to step outside of our marriage. She did it, quote, for her. Her selfishness knows no bounds, and I'm glad to be rid of her. If it makes me the bad guy because I will not go in and see her and never plan on interacting with her ever again, so be it. I hold true to my convictions. She made the choice to betray me. She made the choice to put her needs above the needs of our marriage. So now it's my turn to choose me over everything else. She can rot in the darkest pit of hell for all I care. Let everyone else help fix her. My obligation to ever care about her well-being ended the day we signed the separation agreement. I just needed to get this off my chest. If you're gonna cast judgment on me for feeling how I feel, save it. Like I said above, after 23 years and 2 children, I never really knew this woman at all. I have no sympathy for her and I never will. Let her rot. And jumping into the future, there is one final update. I've been informed by Sue's dad that she's been moved from the ICU to the mental health wing. Doctors are still monitoring her mental state. She's conscious and cognitive again, but obviously lethargic. Her father told me she asked if I came to see her and he said no, and she shut down after. He respectfully said any further news he'll share only if I inquire, because he understands the headspace I'm in. Also, I've scheduled counseling for 17. The first consultation is coming this Monday. So, am I the jerk? The way that the OP describes Sue at the end does make it sound like this was the second of his theories, that she calculated this whole thing as one way to get him back into her life, because as she said herself, she can't imagine life without him. You can never really know what somebody's motivation for doing something like this is, but I can't possibly believe that she believes that doing this would somehow make him come to her and forgive her for everything that she did to him, which is why I think that's most likely not the real reason she did this, unless she is just totally delusional or doesn't understand the depths of the OP's anger and pain from this whole situation. And going back to the original way this whole story was described, part of his main plan plan was to try and make it seem like he was the one cheating in order to plant the seeds of mistrust or dissonance between POS and Sue. But even after all of that planning, all of that setup, in the end, it sounds like POS still wants to be with Sue despite all of OP's efforts. Him showing up to the hospital after all this doesn't necessarily say that, but the part where he goes full novella on her and tells her that he's in love with her and he has to be with her and all of that, even after all of the OP's plans were already in motion, does make it seem like that. So there's a chance that she ends up with them in the end anyway. The OP makes it pretty clear that he doesn't care anymore, even if she moved POS into their old house. So now that you know everything, was the revenge justified or was it going too far, and jerk or not a jerk, and why? I found out my sister has been doing my boyfriend behind my back, so I get even. A little backstory first. I was born into a broken family. My father was an addict. My mother, on the other hand, was the kindest, strongest woman I know. Fortunately, they separated just after the birth of my youngest sister, who was only younger than me by a year. I took after my mother. My sister, though, apart from my mother's looks, she got everything else from dad. Now the thing is, my father was a horrible person. Even before he became an addict, he was an arrogant, selfish, insufferable jerk. And not only that, he cheated on my mother multiple times while she was pregnant with me and my sister, and he also physically hurt her. He was so horrible to the point that when he left, my mother said that it was the happiest day of her life. She continued raising us all by herself while my dad went to God knows where. And you know what? I have never even missed him. 18 years later, and me and my sister are all grown up. And the thing is, we've never really been that close. We fought a lot when we were younger, but it was all usual sibling fights. As we grew, we fought less and less, and we were able to coexist like all siblings do. Though I didn't express it all the time, I did love her. Here's where it all goes haywire. In my senior year of high school, I started dating one of my classmates. He had just transferred during that year and said that he liked me immediately and asked me to go out with him if I was interested. I gave the guy a chance. It goes extremely well, and just 2 months later, we were officially dating. He was sweet, would treat me to lunch, take me to places, and was just a great boyfriend overall. We continued to date through our first and second year of college, and he comes over to our house pretty frequently. Even my mom lets him stay the night. It came to the point that he would come there even when I wasn't there, and I thought nothing of it. I was even glad that he felt so comfortable there, until one day, just a month before our anniversary, I texted him that I would be home later than usual because I still had something to do in school. I was already in my third year and I was busier than I ever was before. Since we usually go home together, he asked me what time I think I'll be home, and I said probably after dinner so he can pick me up then. He says okay. Fortunately though, I managed to finish earlier than I thought, and instead of texting him to pick me up, I decided to surprise him by coming to his house since it's been a while since we spent time together and I missed him. When I got there, his sister, who I was very close with, was visibly confused and immediately asked me what I was doing there. I told her I was there to see her brother, and she becomes even more confused and says, "He told me he was coming to your house to see you though. He left hours ago." This time, I'm the one who's confused, and so I quickly turned around and went home. Thankfully, our houses were only 15 minutes apart from each other, so I got there quickly. The next 20 minutes were like hell. I come home to find his bike outside. The house was dark and I tried my best to go inside as quietly as I could. By the time I got up the stairs, I hear it. Moans. Female and male. The male one sounding particularly like my boyfriend. Tears immediately flooded my eyes. I didn't even need to see it to know it was him. My boyfriend of almost 3 years doing my sister. My feet suddenly had a mind of their own and I yanked the door open. I was seething at this point, and that bee was riding him like a mechanical bull. I stood there as my now ex pushes her off of him, shocked as he puts his clothes back on at the speed of light and starts spewing excuses. I wasn't listening at all. I was sobbing so much I couldn't breathe. The jerk follows me all the way downstairs, and I yell at him that if he doesn't leave that instant, I would tell his entire family. He leaves, and I was left with my sister. I couldn't even even look at her. I stayed downstairs calming myself down until my mom came home from work. She immediately notices something is wrong, but I don't tell her yet. Dinner starts and I feel like crying again. And you know what's even worse? When my sister came down and sat just across from me, I saw no hints of remorse or guilt on her face. Absolutely none. I felt sick. I wanted to vomit, and I swear that at some point during dinner, the evil bee even smirked. A week goes by and I don't say anything. I was so hurt. My ex wasn't saying anything either. No phone calls, no texts, nothing. And my sister was the same. Not a single sorry. I felt so defeated. I was crying multiple times a day and I couldn't even focus in school. One day I finally snap and I tell my mother everything. She was extremely disappointed. She scolds my sister, but she didn't even seem to care. Then suddenly I remembered my ex had told me his passwords. He had told me early in our relationship and I never bothered to open them because I was never the type to go through my significant other's messages. I trusted this guy, and this is what I get. Anyway, I managed to open his messenger account and there I see hundreds of messages between him and my sister. I felt weak in the knees. It had been going on for almost 4 months then. I took screenshots. It turns out they had been going out while I would be at school. All three of us were from different schools. My sister couldn't get into mine because her grades were too low, and so were my boyfriends. My pain quickly turned into anger and I wanted nothing more than to make them both pay. I couldn't stomach the sight of my sister. The fact that she would go behind my back like that over some guy made me sick. We were supposed to always be there for each other. After a month, I asked my mother if I could just move out and live with my aunt for a while because I just couldn't take it anymore. She was sad, but she understood. I felt so sorry for her. She held my sister accountable for what she did, but at the end of the day, she was still her daughter, so she couldn't completely turn her back on her. I didn't want to give her the burden of having to choose, so I did instead. So I moved out and lived with my aunt and promised to keep in touch. The next 6 months were basically me putting my life back together. I became a working student and did some freelance work to earn some money. And as I started to earn more, I dropped out of school completely and became a full-time freelancer. As the months went by, I would earn more and more and I had more than enough money to spend for myself. And from then on, I started to send money to my mom monthly. One day I got curious and decided to check on my sister and my ex. When I unblocked them, I regretted it instantly. The jerks were still together and my sister was even flaunting their relationship on Instagram. Suddenly, it's as if no time had passed by at all, and I was angry yet again. I scrolled through more pictures and it was obvious that my sister was completely in love with him. I acted on anger. I sent the screenshots I took from before and sent it to our cousins and told them everything. They all ended up hating her. And then I sent it to my ex's sister and told her everything. She punched him and tells their parents, and a day later I receive a text from them apologizing on behalf of their son. It made me feel slightly better. A week later, my mom asks me to come home and spend the weekend there. I decided to say yes this time. I stopped by a mall on the way to get a gift from my mom, and guess who I see? My ex-boyfriend with a girl who wasn't my sister, holding hands. I laugh hard. The urge to take out my phone and take a picture to send it to my sister was so strong, but I stopped myself. It wouldn't be painful enough. So I hide where he can't see me and follow them. After about an hour, she goes to the bathroom. I follow her there. I approach her when she comes out of the cubicle and say, "Is the guy you're with your boyfriend?" She looked a little bit scared and confused, but she answers, "Yes." Nonetheless, I quickly tell her that the same guy is currently dating my sister and even showed her some pictures. The girl was completely horrified. She said she had no idea he was seeing someone else, and I fought the urge to laugh. I tell her to get rid of him quickly and I'll tell her everything she needed to know, but also asked her not to dump him yet. So she makes up some excuse to him about an emergency at home, and they go their separate ways for the day. We meet up at a coffee shop close to the mall afterwards. There I spill everything, including all the details about the cheating. When I finished, she looked so mad, almost as if it happened to her. And then she goes on to reveal that a longtime boyfriend of hers actually cheated on her as well. We talked some more, and as time passed by, I came to discover that the girl was actually really sweet, and I felt sorry that she became a victim of my ex as well. She asked me if I was going to get revenge, and I said yes, but I needed her help. I also told her she could say no if she didn't want to, but she said she wanted to help, so I told her my plan and she was all for it. I came home that night excited. My mom seemed pleased, and my sister looked a little pissed. I didn't give a care though, since I had the knowledge that my ex-boyfriend, the guy she destroyed our relationship for, was on his way to destroy her. The girl and I talked for the next 3 weeks that I was there, and she would send me screenshots of her and my ex's conversations, also pictures of them together. We continued to talk even after I came back to my aunt's house, and exactly 2 months after we met, the plan was finally in action. It was a week before my sister and my ex's anniversary. Yes, they had an anniversary, and I was about to give her the greatest gift. By that time, my ex had confessed to the other girl about his relationship with my sister, but she told him that it was okay, and that they could still be together because she didn't care. Little did he know, her and I were basically best friends now, and had come up with a master plan to ruin his life. I come home again, and spent the week there leading up to their anniversary. It was the longest week of my life. The day finally comes, and after my sister leaves to go to his house, I wait a few hours. Then I FaceTime his sister to ask if the two jerks were home. She says yes, then I send it. Dozens of pictures of my ex with the other girl and screenshots of their conversations. One where he was telling her about how much he loves her and how he's planning to leave my sister for her soon. There was one where he even expressed how annoying he found her and that sometimes he wants to, quote, strangle her. A whole bunch of other screenshots where he insults her, calls her stupid, desperate, and many more. He also says that she was awful in bed and way too noisy and that he barely touched her the past few days. Ouch. But it wasn't enough for me. The final touch was a 3-minute long video of my friend and my ex doing it. Yes, she did give me her full consent to send it. She was on top, exactly how I found my sister and my ex before, and she was writing him into oblivion. But I cropped it so her face wasn't shown, but my ex's face was in full view. It was hilarious. The jerk was enjoying it so much, and I know my sister would probably have a seizure once she watches it. Afterwards, I wait. I was still on FaceTime with his sister, and after a while, I hear it. Screaming. Objects being thrown. More screaming. His sister comes upstairs to check on them, and I hear everything. My sister was sobbing, and what's even more messed up is that my ex didn't even try to deny any of it, and he asked her to just leave. His sister and I talk some more, and she tells me how she's never liked my sister, and her parents never did either. They said that they would ignore her whenever she would come by at their house. They would even ask about me sometimes just to piss her off. After about an hour, my sister finally comes home, and I sat there grinning like a devil as she steps into the living room, face puffy from crying. We make eye contact, and I smirk at her, and I said, "You deserve it," before going upstairs. I don't speak to her again for days, and she refused to even leave her room. The satisfaction I felt was through the roof, and I even told my mom that I could move back in now. But it didn't end there, because my ex had gotten my sister pregnant. A huge part of me wasn't shocked, but my mom, of course, was disappointed. We had to tell the rest of our family, and they were all disappointed with her as well. Before she gave birth, my sister told my mom she was going to move in with my ex's family since they have to take care of their baby, and my mom refused to let him step foot in our house again. But since our houses were really close to each other, she agreed. It was pathetic. It was obvious that she still wanted to be with him even after everything he did, but hey, it wasn't my problem anymore. But according to my ex's sister though, her parents weren't too happy about the whole thing, and although my ex said he would take the responsibility of his child, he didn't want anything to do with my sister anymore. Total jerk. So I continued to live my life, working, going out, and focusing on becoming even better. It didn't take long for me to finally be happy again, and all the pain and betrayal I felt was like a distant memory. I reconnected with my old friends and even started dating again. I also kept in touch with the girl who helped me with my revenge. She, of course, has dumped my ex, broke up with him just the day after it all went down, and we're genuinely good friends now, and we meet when we can. I don't keep in touch with my sister at all, but according to my ex's sister, she is absolutely miserable because she had to drop out of school, and my ex barely spoke to her and would always be gone, sometimes for days, and he even brought home girls on multiple occasions and did them in that same house that my sister was pregnant in. He also wasn't even there when she gave birth. I didn't feel sorry for her at all since she chose to stay with him, but I did feel sorry for the kid for having those two jerks as his parents. They would go to our house at least 3 times a week to see my mother, and my sister would completely ignore my existence. Guess what? That B still hasn't apologized. I didn't really care at that point, so I ignored it. But one time, I kindly offered to buy her baby some clothes, and she fixed me with the nastiest look before saying,
"We don't need your freaking money."
I was appalled, and then I was pissed again. Alright then, if that's how she wants to play. Funnily enough, I run into my ex at a bar just a couple of days later. He looks terrible, and I questioned what I even saw in him. He sees me and actually looks happy. I, on the other hand, no longer felt anything for him, only disgust. He tries to make conversation, telling me that I look great and even apologizes. I was shocked, but his apology didn't really mean anything to me anymore. Later that night, I received a bunch of messages from him. He was apologizing again, and then went on to say how much he regrets cheating on me before begging for another chance and swears that this time things would be different and that he was gonna change for me. I laughed so hard that I fall off my bed. The ocean would dry up before I'll even think of taking him back. But since my sister pissed me off once again and I was feeling a little petty, I sent her the screenshots of those messages with the caption, "This your baby daddy?" I knew she was still in love with him even after everything, and I knew that it would hurt for her to see how he's willing to change for me, but not for her, the mother of his child. He barely even gave her money for their child. It was only my ex's parents and my mom who supported her financially. She blocked me. And no, I don't ever take my ex back. Last I heard, he started using illegal substances. Fast forward to now, I continue to thrive while she continues to be miserable. We recently had a family reunion, and at one point, she says to our relatives that she's having a hard time, and one of our cousins looks at her dead in the eyes and says, "Well, maybe if you didn't do your sister's boyfriend, you wouldn't be in this position." She was absolutely dumbfounded, and there were tears in her eyes. I almost choked on my wine to keep from laughing. She probably didn't think that they knew. Well, now she does. And they all didn't bother to hide how much they despised her. She had no one on her side and was considered the disappointment of the family, but she only had herself to blame. By the way, if anyone is confused why we still live with our parents during college, I'm Filipina, and this happened in the Philippines. Here, we don't move out until we have kids, and sometimes not even then. Some people don't believe, and honestly, I understand. I wish it was fake, truly. This particular event has caused so much stress on our entire family, but I do get some of y'all. About the girl who helped me, I was actually really shocked myself with how willing she was to participate. There definitely had been times where I was scared she would out me to my ex and my sister, but I guess it all just reminded her of her situation with her ex, and she also seemed mad about being made into a side chick. I didn't expect that she would send a video. I asked her so many times if she was sure. My ex was a horrible person, but he was attractive and good at friskiness, as much as I hate to admit. She basically used him for doing the deed, and I don't find anything wrong with that. He deserved it. And to be honest, I would have done the same if it was the other way around. I get why it might seem made up, but I had a friend who got sent a video of her then boyfriend and another girl doing it as well. The girl sent it because she wanted her boyfriend to herself. It happens more frequently than one might think. Bees can be messy these days, but again, I get why it might seem unbelievable. Believe what you want, it's not like it would affect any of us negatively. What's done is done. So with all that said, am I the jerk? In this type of situation, the person you're dating can do whatever they want and it can hurt you to a certain degree, but to have your own family, your sister do this to you is something that will probably drastically change your life from that point forward. Your relationship with the rest of your family, how you think about things in general. If that's not a sacred relationship, then what is? The sister here obviously receives a heavy dose of karma for what she did to the OP, but really, what will ever make their relationship normal again? Probably nothing. I mean, over time, it might hurt less, but even then, 30 years in the future, you're always going to remember that this thing happened. It wasn't an accident. She chose to do this with her current boyfriend. And the fact that the sister still refuses to apologize is very strange. She obviously can't deny that this all happened because the OP witnessed it happening. So rather than taking ownership for it and saying, hey, I did this, I'm sorry, and trying to pretend like you care about the relationship with your own sister, she just doesn't even acknowledge it at all, even after all of this. That's That's sad. And lastly, the fact that the ex wants to get back with the OP, which would obviously lead to the situation where the OP is raising the baby of her sister from when her boyfriend cheated on her. One of the top responses made a joke saying, what kid wouldn't want to be raised by Uncle Daddy and Auntie Mommy? And if they had a kid, they would be half siblings / half cousins. Anyway, let me know what you think of this whole situation. Did the revenge go too far? What would you have done? And jerk or not a jerk, and why? An entitled Karen gets hurt because she doesn't listen. Okay, so I'm going back to work because it's finally opening back up after the virus, and that made me remember this story. Some of the moments of this are a little fuzzy, and I was running on 3 hours of sleep that day. I work at a popular thrift store in Canada. When I was on maternity leave with my little one, I had to go into my store to buy some more baby clothes, as he was just getting way too big for his younger clothing. I hate buying brand new unless it's on sale. So I was browsing some of the household aisles, hoping to add to my collection of weird and pretty pottery that I had started when on leave, when I hear a smash at the other end. I look at my watch and realized that most of the employees who would deal with this problem were on lunch. So the policy is, if something made out of glass breaks, one employee would stand at the break point to stop customers from stepping on it, and the other would go get a broom to clean the mess. Most times, the people who rolled the product were on the floor to deal with it, but Cash was in charge of that when the break came. Since no one was around, I decided, what the heck, I'm not in a hurry and the baby sleeping in the cart. So I stood there, and my mother-in-law, who was with me at the time, went to tell the cash register about the break. Most customers were my regulars who knew I worked there and just had a baby. Some of them even stood there, out of the glass, to gush about how cute my little man is. Then, this one lady who looked like a Karen comes near, and I tell her, excuse me ma'am, I'll have to ask you to go down the other aisle and come back to this one once the mess is cleaned up. She scoffed at me, looking at me up and down.
You're not the boss of me. You don't even work here.
And then started walking on the glass. To be fair, the clothing policy at the time was all black and I was wearing bright colors and a long flowing skirt. They have since gotten rid of the all black policy, thank goodness, as I hate wearing dark colors. So I calmly said to the lady, please stop walking ma'am, this glass could hurt you. And yes, I do work here, I'm just on leave with the baby. I motioned to him.
What glass? There's nothing on the floor.
She said as she stopped to look on the shelves. She never even looked down.
I highly doubt you work here. You're just some entitled kid who had a baby way too young and is now trying to use it to get free things.
I was 23 years old at that point, 24 now. She went to walk away, and at that moment, this lady, if I can even call her that, slipped on the glass and hit the ground. I asked her if she was okay, and she screamed,
why didn't you tell me there was glass? I'll have you fired!
I did warn you, I said as a supervisor and my mother-in-law showed up. The supervisor was the only one available to clean the mess, and she's one of the best ones there. My mother-in-law saw that I was in distress and asked me what happened as the supervisor helped the lady stand. Luckily, the lady only got a small scratch on her hand from the glass.
I want her fired. Where is her manager?
Which made me think, oh, so now she believes that I work here. I'm the manager on duty, she said to the lady. What happened, OP? As I explained to her what happened, the lady kept trying to butt in, but the supervisor kept holding one finger up to silence her. Another customer chimed in and said, OP's telling the truth. I heard the whole thing and you can check the cameras to see for yourself. Most customers know that employees can get in trouble if they try to help with other customers, so they stayed out of it until now. Thank you, the supervisor said to the nice customer, then looked at the lady. So, OP decides to go above and beyond in her job when she is on maternity leave, when she is a customer herself and tries to keep others safe. But you want her fired? Lady, you're crazy. OP did nothing wrong. The lady glares at me.
She's lying. She wanted me to get hurt. That's why she didn't tell me about the glass.
It was bright green. You can't even miss it like you could with clear glass. There's a witness, miss, and OP isn't the type to lie about these things. She then looked at me and said, OP, go rest in the break room. Your mother can go with you too. She knew she was my mother-in-law, but always just called her my mom, as she'd come in every day to pick me up when I was pregnant. So from there, I thanked her and went to the break room where my coworkers fussed over the baby and got to take turns holding him as I rested and told him what happened. I don't know what happened to the lady, but I was given a $20 gift card as a thanks for going above and beyond and doing my job even when I was off, and it actually paid for most of my items after my discount. The lady probably left when I was in the break room to continue shopping, as she and the mess were nowhere to be seen. The funny part is, housewares are not even my section of the store, so it wasn't even my job to do it. I just didn't want to see anyone hurt, and we are all still trained how to do it in case we are put into another area to help out. So, was I the one responsible for Karen getting hurt? Am I the jerk? The original poster here really didn't have to do anything. She could have just walked away and let the situation unfold as it was going to unfold. But she took it upon herself to try and help people out so that they wouldn't get hurt. Whether or not the person was an employee, you can probably just tell that they're trying to help you out. So even if the Karen was right, this was just an imposter, why would anyone be making up a lie about glass being on the floor? I mean, I'm sure you could think of some crazy off-the-wall possibilities, but it's not very likely. I just love that she says, "You're not the boss of me, you don't even work here," and then starts walking on the glass. Because in that moment, before she even slipped, she could probably already hear the crunching of the glass beneath her shoes and just refused to acknowledge reality because she didn't want to seem like she was wrong. So let me know how you guys want to handle a situation like this down below, and jerk or not a jerk, and why. This story starts 31 years ago, but the revenge part was pure serendipity that began 2 years ago. I'm going to shorten most parts because it's a crazy ride, but I'll be happy to answer any questions y'all have. I learned a lot on this journey, and part of the reason for this write-up is to share that with others. So let's start at the beginning. In 1990, I was just out of middle school and my sister was still in elementary school. My dad met his third wife at the only gas station in our town. They soon moved in together, and my dad abandoned us in our basement apartment to live in a shanty houseboat that didn't run, so he could live with her. He would show up every other week and give me $40 for groceries. Eventually, someone figured out the situation and called my mom. We went to live with her, which was, believe it or not, worse. My dad and his shanty wife got married in 1991. Not long after, she called me and told me my dad's brain tumor had returned. It hadn't, and that he couldn't handle the stress of being around us. That the only people he could bear to be around was her and her son, Shorty, who was my age. When I called my dad to ask if this was true, he said that it wasn't, and he just couldn't believe that she would say that to begin with. That was one of our last conversations until 2 years ago. The middle. There's not much in this part. I worked my way through college, living in my car from time to time, and my dad and I were no contact. But I heard from family that he'd bought a house and put his son through some vocational classes. When my grandmother died, Shorty and shanty wife showed up in a truck and took all the furniture and anything else that wasn't tied down or already gone. Eventually, I went no contact with my dad's side of the family. I struggled for years, decades really, but I made it. And I have a great job and a good family now. The best revenge is living well, right? The pre-end warm-up. 2 years ago, in October of 2019, I get a call from my dad's brother Alan. He told me my dad was in a nursing home in another state. Great. And I needed to go see him because he needed my help. WTH? Shorty had ghosted him. Ha ha ha. The nursing home, coincidentally, was about 20 minutes from my house, and I saw an opportunity and I went. The reunion was underwhelming. I didn't want to make amends, but I did want to hear how he wound up dumped and all alone in another state. And it was a really, really good story. Shanty wife got lung cancer and put my dad in a nursing home before she died in 2017. She suffered, and I was happy to hear it, but was sad it wasn't butt cancer. Shorty became his power of attorney when she died and had been visiting my dad, living in my dad's house with his 2 children and taking care of my dad's affairs since his mom died. But now he was MIA and my dad was worried about him. He asked me to drive the hour and a half to his house to check on everything. That's all he wanted. He never even asked me how I had been. I agreed to go, I think out of morbid curiosity. I'd never been to my dad's house. I did want to see where he lived with his real family for 30 years. I wanted to see what my life could have been. It was 50 shades of awful. The grass hadn't been cut all summer. You couldn't get to the front door because of the overgrowth. There were 3 pickup trucks in the yard. 2 were full of trash, cabs and beds and back seats. Just trash. Mail, clothes, paper, shoes, garbage bags. I couldn't understand it. My dad's handicap modified modified SUV was on 4 flats and full of garbage too. I didn't have a key, so I just walked around. From what windows I could look through, the inside was in shambles and hoarded to hell. On the front and carport doors were dozens of notices from the city that they were going to condemn the place. The carport was also hoarded, boxes and boxes stacked on top of each other, most rotting from the rain. The yard was full of garbage, broken Christmas ornaments, more shoes, rusted tools, old toys. There was a letter in the mailbox notifying him that since the house was abandoned, mail would not be delivered anymore. That night, I googled powers of attorney and how to use them. I went back the next day and showed my bedbound dad the pictures on my phone. He vowed to beat Shorty's butt and then asked me for help once more. I told him I would, but he'd have to sign power of attorney over to me. All of it. Durable, which is financial, and medical. If he didn't, he could figure this out by himself. He agreed. So I set about finding a lawyer who would drive to another state and do the paperwork in the nursing home. Bless that lawyer for being so good at his job, because all I did was tell him what I knew and he put together a beautifully bulletproof power of attorney. It was full of stuff that I didn't even know I would need. He also filled the paperwork to revoke Shorty's power of attorney, and now I'm unstoppable. We're from a small rural town, and it's the kind of creepy landlocked place that no matter how long you've been gone or how far you've been away, when you go back, you will see someone you know. Even if you don't know them, you know them. It's like playing 7 degrees of everybody all the time. It's suffocating, but it can also be helpful. The beginning of the end. I got to work the next morning. I didn't know how scorched the earth would be when I finished, and I didn't want Shorty or anyone from his inbred family trying to find me, so I made sure nothing I did had my name on it. I opened a Google account for my dad and got a Google number. I opened a P.O. box for him in his town. I put in a mail forwarding notice. I pulled his credit report. I took the power of attorney to my dad's small town bank, changed the address on his account, and got new account numbers. I requested copies of every transaction back to the day Shanty's wife had died, which was about 13 months worth. I had to go to the main branch 2 hours from my house the next day to pick up the records. I sat in the lobby all afternoon going through the accounts. I cornered a service rep and got a crash course in his debits and deposits. This is when I figured out the extent of Shorty's staggering stupidity. My dad got about $5,000 a month in disability and Social Security every month. Twice a week, Shorty was going into a branch and withdrawing cash, all of the cash, for 13 months. And every time he did it, as the power of attorney, he had to sign a form stating that he was acting on behalf of my dad, and that form was notarized by the bank. I went through every withdrawal and got the bank to confirm that every one of them was made by Shorty. Then I went to the house and called a locksmith. I knew it was bad, but I had no idea what was waiting for me there. He got the first door open and the stench rolled out like a fog bank. We both gagged. 2 locks later, I was so embarrassed by what he had to see and smell that I gave him a $60 tip. And with shiny new keys in hand, I called the cops. I told them I was power of attorney for my dad. I was checking on his house and there were 3 vehicles there that didn't belong to him. He asked me if I knew who they belonged to. I said no, and I wanted them towed. He told me to call a tow company and he would meet them there. They showed up with 2 wreckers. The tow truck guy got out and asked me for a signature. I only signed my first name. As I was signing, he asked, "Do you know Shorty?" Running on pure hatred at this point, I surprised myself and said, "Do you?" He said that he did and that he's a jerk. I responded with, "He might be. Hey, can you do me a favor? If you see him, will you tell him OP is coming for him?" His bravado evaporated. He knows a crazy bee when he sees one. They towed the trucks. When everyone was gone, I opened the door in the carport to peek in. The sun was going down and it was dark in the house. I heard something faint and after a few seconds realized it was the roaches and the rats doing their roach and rat stuff. I could smell it all in my hair. I sat on the carport steps and watched the sun go down. I was mad, just so cosmically livid that 72 hours was all it took to dissolve 3 decades. And here I was, stinking and listening to the rats and cleaning up everyone else's stuff, taking time away from my family. And for what? I had a coming to Jesus moment with myself. I could either bow out now or double down. And the thing is, I'm tenacious to a fault. I had to survive. And this was a bone that I couldn't put down. The thought of Shorty's life being upended, his only source of income disappearing literally overnight, and my dad having to hear secondhand from me that he's broken alone made made me absolutely giddy. I desperately wanted them both to lose what they had, so I decided I was going to triple dog down. That night, I Googled restraining orders, and it was surprisingly easy to get one. I went to the courthouse in my hometown and went to the clerk's office, and I told her I needed a restraining order. I filled the form in at a rickety little table while I was there. I wasn't prepared to see a judge that day, but she took the form and said, "Okay, I'll see if the judge is still here." That kind of scared me. She took me to his chambers, and as I was waiting, I looked around and saw he had certificates of appreciation hanging up from various veterans groups. Then I wiped my palms and thought, fish in a barrel. He asked me about my dad's stint in the Marines and about the DOD office logo on my sweater. I'm a contractor. He read my form and granted the temporary order. I would have to go back for the permanent one where Shorty would be able to argue against it. Then I went home and Googled biohazard companies and elder abuse statutes in my states. I hired a biohazard company to shovel all the crap out of the house for $7,000. I would have paid double. They found my dad's mummified dog under some pizza boxes in the master bedroom. They sent me pictures and salvaged some papers. Shorty was served during this time and a hearing was set. I got to work collecting and documenting everything. I made pictures and spreadsheets and timelines with cross-references because now they had my full attention. The paid versions of Truthfinder and Trello seriously got me through all of this. In my spare time, I went to the nursing home and gave my dad 8x10 copies of the pictures of his dead dog from every angle. Before court, I went to the police station nearby and told them I wanted to report an elder abuse crime. A white-collar detective came out and told me that it was a domestic matter and that since Shorty had been power of attorney, everything he had done was legal. And this was the day I got to teach a small-town detective about the fiduciary responsibilities of a power of attorney. Thanks, Google. I handed him a copy of the statute with the applicable sections highlighted. Then I handed him a thick folder with bank statements, pictures of the hoarded house, a dead dog, a copy of my dad's credit report that showed he was tens and tens of thousands of dollars in debt, and a spreadsheet listing every cash withdrawal with a running total of the stolen amounts. The grand total was over $130,000 in cash. That's not including the lost value of the house or the credit cards he opened and used, and I told him he could keep that folder since it wasn't the only one that I had. Then I told him I would wait for a case number and I sat down. He came back about 30 minutes later and apologized, said I had a case and gave me a case number. Then I headed down to the courthouse. There were other people there and I had to wait my turn. And while I was waiting, that stupid idiot schlepped his sloppy butt into the courtroom by himself and obviously, literally, not metaphorically, came dirty. His shoes were untied and that turned my giggle box over. Then it was our turn and we stood up. The same judge asked me some questions, asked him some questions, asked me if I had any proof. I had a very thick folder of it. The judge asked me if I had gone to the police. I said, "Well, yes, sir, I have. Do you have a case number?" As a matter of fact, the order was granted permanently and for life, but not before the judge halted proceedings and told Shorty he needed a lawyer. Someone told me that the courthouse would have a copy of my dad's DD-214, which are his discharge papers. So while I was there, I got copies of those because why not? I also used my power of attorney to take Shanty Wife off the deed to the house. That way, if my dad died and went to probate, Shorty had no immediate claim. I also went and got copies of my dad's birth certificate and Shanty Wife's death certificate. Technically, stepchildren can't request that information, but the clerk who waited on me recognized my dad's name and told me she lost her V to my Uncle Alan in the 60s and went to my grandparents' funeral. So I got all the forms that I wanted. Shanty Wife left my dad $50,000 in life insurance. About $35,000 of that was left since Shorty was spending my dad's money and not his mom's. So I opened an Ally account and transferred every penny over. Then I set up recurring transfers for the monthly deposits. At any given time, there was no more than $100 in his account. I also found a house flipper that paid me enough for the house to pay off his mortgage. And that's the thing about probate. There's nothing to fight over if there's nothing there. And I made sure there was nothing there. My dad died thinking he still owned a house. Speaking of which, this is about the time I found my dad's life insurance policies. They were up to date and Shanty Wife was a beneficiary. My power of attorney didn't allow me to change beneficiaries, but it did allow me to assign them. And since Shanty Wife was dead, there was technically no beneficiary. This is where the death certificates came in handy. I assigned my sister and me as beneficiaries, irrevocable too, which means that the only way to change that is for my dad and me and my sister to agree to it. I kept my dad in the dark about all of this. The only thing he ever really knew was about the restraining order and his dead dog. I found out that he had purchased the gravesite next to Shanty Wife and wanted to be buried next to her. That was just never going to happen. I googled national cemeteries and found out he qualified to be in one since he was a disabled Vietnam era veteran, so I arranged for that instead. And the cherry on top of it all, my dad died in June this year and I was there. He's buried in a national cemetery far away where no one will ever go visit him. The only obituary I ran was on the funeral home's website, and that was only for insurance purposes. I wrote it as vague as possible. There was no service. His urn is purple, the color that he hated most. I got a call in August from the prosecutor's office in my hometown. The lady on the other end is married to my first cousin because, of course she is. That's how it works there. Shorty was arrested just after midnight on July 1st, was still in jail, and had been arraigned on a felony elder abuse charge. Now he's facing 10 years in FPMITA prison. She told me not to expect a trial anytime soon, as it can take up to 3 years for that to happen. I told her that was awesome since the uncertainty will hopefully haunt him. And after all of that, he's still got prison to look forward to. He lost his kids, he lost his dad in quotes, and now I'm spending his mom's cancer money. He lost his free house, his trucks, he has no credits, and he will never be able to get any sort of decent job and will, hopefully, for a long time, not be able to find a decent place to live. And I sleep like a baby. Am I the jerk? The part that stood out to me as being the most petty above everything else is the fact that he chose a purple urn for his dad because it was the color that he hated most. I get why he would feel the way he felt about him, especially from his perspective. It's kind of like the dad chose the other family over him and then in the end gave power of attorney to Shorty. It's just kind of wild that the dad got $5,000 a month in disability and social security, and Shorty would just walk into a branch, withdraw all the cash and use it for whatever he wanted to. That's a lot of money to be stealing and just using for whatever you want. And the dad must have been comfortable enough as he was where he wasn't noticing that $5,000 a month was just getting taken out of his disability and social security. The part that probably hurts the OP the most is the fact that the dad seems to have no remorse at all for basically just abandoning him once he met his third wife at that gas station. They hadn't seen each other that entire time, and in his elderly age, instead of trying to make amends, he just asked them to do favors for him because he can't get a hold of the person that is in charge of everything, Shorty. And as the OP was growing up, when he was working his way through life, his dad was paying for the vocational tuition for the son of his wife when he had his own son that he didn't do that for. Of course, that's gotta sting. So let me know how you see this whole situation. Do you think the revenge was justified or was it going too far? Let me know down below in jerk or not a jerk and why. My bully got his dad to take the life of my dog, so my dad had to teach him a lesson. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. This happened in 1995 in a small rural town in Chaco province, Argentina. Everyone knows each other here until this very day. My father was an electrician, the only one in town, so he was constantly meeting people as he was born and raised here. He was very well known by everyone. He grew up with many of the police officers from back then and even had asados together, Argentinian barbecue, at least 3 times a month for years. My father was a non-violent man. This was the only time I ever saw him do something like this. The other man with his busy son were not from town. They had moved here a year or so prior. They were from Buenos Aires. I don't really know the guy, only his kid was an absolute jerk to almost every kid on the block, and he constantly picked on me and my brother since we were the youngest of our neighborhood. Therefore, we couldn't defend ourselves. Bucky wasn't trained since we knew nothing about training, but he was loyal and playful with every kid. One thing for sure, he was protective. One afternoon we were playing in the park and out came Bully Kid, who at first threw rocks at us, then got closer and started calling us names, and we got a little scared. He was bigger than us. We tried to leave, but he blocked us and he started swinging on my brother. I tried to stop him, but he did the same to me. Bucky heard us crying and came running, jumping and getting the bully's arm at once. He bit, shook, and released, staying between us and the bully, barking like mad until the the kid left running. We saw him get inside his house, and a few seconds later, out came his father with a sledgehammer. Bucky stood in front of us, hairs raised, barking, but the man didn't stop. He got close, raised the sledgehammer, and brought it straight down. He didn't do it once, he did it 5 times. The first blow I'll never forget, the sound of steel connecting with the skull, the painful whimper of our dog. Bucky got knocked with the first blow. By the 5th and final, his head was caved in. My brother and I were frozen in place, scared to death, crying a lot. This dad said something that I don't remember now and left. We were unable to move for a moment. Such was our fear. Finally, I grabbed my brother and went home. Dad was fixing a fan, and when he saw us, he asked us what happened. We told him what happened, and he just said, "Right, okay, let's wash your faces and grab some ice cream." Yes, that's what our dad did. He took us for ice cream. He did a pretty good job of masking his emotions and seeming cheerful to us. That night, when my brother was asleep and I was playing in the kitchen, he grabbed the wrench, told mom he had to fix something at the neighbor's house. I assumed it was another neighbor since it was a common thing for my dad to get asked by neighbors to fix things. Nodded to mom. Mom nodded back. Yes, she knew, and then he left. He came back a few minutes later, told me to go to bed, and that was it. A decade later, we came to know what happened. He went to the guy's house, knocked on the door, struck him so hard it rocked his head back, told him he would break one limb for each of his children whom he made cry. I can only imagine what he would have done if we were more than 2 kids. Proceeded to beat the guy up in front of his family and then took the wrench and broke his legs. He then left the house, went home, asked me to go to bed, talked to my mom, and went straight to the police. Turned himself in and was actually delayed until the police went and checked with the other guy. My dad also showed our dead dog to them, and the police found the sledgehammer in the bully's house, still with the blood on it, and they let my father go. They also spoke with the dude when he got better and suggested that he leave town, since if they weren't like before, they would never be like now. To this, you gotta understand the mindset from someone that lives in a small rural town. We looked at outsiders with mistrust back then, and it took a while for people to get used to you if you were new in town. However, these people came and weren't very much liked, apparently because of the kid, and the father was also a jerk. I do not condone the actions of my father, nor am I justifying in any way the events that transpired them, but as a father myself, I can totally understand to what extent a man can react when their kids are at play. I loved my dad, and I have mad respect for him. Rest in peace, Dad. We miss you greatly. So there, that's the full story. Am I the jerk? This was beyond awful. I can't even imagine something like that happening to a dog that I cared about right in front of me. How could you ever get that image out of your mind, ever? And then of course, they left the body of the dog there. So the 2 kids, the OP and his brother, were left there with the dog. I'm really surprised that the dad had the composure to not act in the moment, but instead took them to have ice cream and then plotted his revenge for that night. His actions seemed like they were impulsive actions, but his timing was not impulsive at all. It was calculated. He waited until the day was over to carry out his plan, even taking them to ice cream to, I guess, calm them down or help them heal through this really traumatic experience. So the question is the wrench revenge going way too far, or do you think it was justified here? Let me know down below and jerk or not a jerk and why. My wife separated from me, and the guy that she got with was a hacker. He tried hacking me, so I decided to get the FBI involved and ruin both of their lives. Here's what happened. These events took place over several years. I'm going to begin with the main players. Me, my ex-wife Pepper, which is revenge target number 1. Her boyfriend Steve, revenge target number 2. My boyfriend's ex-wife Maria, my co-partner in the revenge. My daughter Sarah, and my friend Jason, accomplice in the revenge. With that, let's get some backstory out of the way. So Pepper and I had a very up and down marriage. It was one of those that I was madly in love with her, but looking back, I think she was in it more for the money and convenience. She had one son we'll call Addict, because he was and still is a major addict. Before we got married, I also had one son that I had full custody of. While I married, we had Sarah. I toughed the marriage out for as long as I could, but eventually we just couldn't keep it together. We separated, and due to traveling some for work and having custody of my son, I moved back to my hometown a few states away so my parents could help, but kept an apartment in the town that Pepper and Sarah lived in so that I could still spend as much time with my daughter as I could. At this time, I asked my best friend Jason, who is a lawyer and owns his own firm, to do up a child support agreement for us. It is very important to know that we only addressed child support. It had nothing about custody or visitation or anything else in it. So for about a year, this is how it would work. I would spend a month with Sarah while my parents watched my other son, then I would spend a month with my son. Almost exactly a year later, I could no longer afford to keep keep 2 households, and Pepper was wanting to move back to her hometown, which was in a different state but closer to where I lived. So I gave up the apartment and she moved. The new situation continued for a couple more years. Pepper and I remained friendly and even tried to reconcile the relationship a couple of times, but it wouldn't work out. I was still deeply in love with her, but we couldn't come to an agreement on things like where to live and such. I forced myself to try and move on and started dating. She had been dating basically from the day I moved out. Even though I still loved her, our relationship moved more into good friends than husband and wife. So she finally meets Steve. I never was told much about Steve other than he was a certified ethical hacker, and that is what he did for employment. This is important later. While they were dating, she would send me texts about their dates. She even texted me the day that they first did the deed together. This hurt deeply, and looking back, I think this is what she wanted, but I tried to play the part of a good friend and confidant. Steve and Pepper had been dating for 6 months when, out of the blue, she tells me they broke up and she realized that she is madly in love with me. Since it's at the beginning of summer, she packs up some suitcases and heads to my state. They were going to spend the summer with me and see if they liked it or not. We had an amazing summer. All the kids are getting along. Addict even loved it there. So she makes it official. We are back together and they are moving in. We went and registered my daughter for school, and we were even able to get her on a Pee-wee cheerleading team for the summer. She made several friends and was loving being here. There was only one problem. Pepper still had an apartment that had all of her furniture and stuff in it. I offered to go with my truck and help load everything, but she insisted that her and Addict get it done. So off they go to pack up and then head to their new home. As you can guess, things didn't go as planned. She was home for about 3 days when she informs me that under no circumstances will she move and that her and Steve are in love and they are moving in with each other. To say that I was destroyed was an understatement. I couldn't understand why she had done it. The worst part was that she left it to me to tell Sarah the bad news. When I told her, the devastated look on her face started turning my feelings of hurt into feelings of anger. Then Sarah broke down and started begging to stay with me and started spilling the beans. She told me things about how her mom would leave with Steve for days and leave Addict in charge. She had to learn to cook for herself at 8 because Addict would spend the money on his illegal substances and be lit the whole time. If Addict wasn't left in charge, Pepper would use her multiple convicted felon niece to watch her. She also told me about the first time she had met Steve. He came over to their house, basically said hello, and him and her mom disappeared into the bedroom and started to do the deed very loudly. Sarah was outside the door bawling and they just ignored and continued. This is how my 8-year-old learned about doing the deed, and she is still in counseling trying to recover 7 years later. At this point, my anger had turned to rage. I immediately notified Pepper that there was no way Sarah was coming back and I would fight her to the death to keep her out of that situation. Pepper responded by getting an emergency hearing in her state to force Sarah back. I had to scramble, but I managed to get a lawyer and easily won the hearing, which Pepper showed up late for and told the judge it was due to a disability. The judge agreed that since there was no custody agreement and with the troubling accusations that I gathered, it was best now for Sarah to stay with me. I had won the first battle, but it was short-lived. Within an hour of the hearing, I started getting tons of phishing emails and texts. I was also getting password resets and MFA codes from my bank, Facebook, Reddit, and many other accounts. I knew that Steve was behind it. The very next day, Jason calls. His law firm's website, email, and phone account had been hacked. Because he had to disclose the hack to the court and because he was working on a semi-high profile case at the time, the FBI got involved. To say I was enraged was an understatement. These two people had destroyed me, harmed my daughter, and tarnished the reputation of my lifelong friend. It was time for them to pay, and pay dearly. I was a man on a mission. I spent hours digging up as much dirt as I could on Steven and Pepper. I had a lot of luck with Pepper. I found social media posts of her out late drinking that correlated to tardiness and missed days at school for Sarah. I found tons of pictures of her and 2 strange kids doing fun activities. I found neighbors that were willing to testify that Sarah had come to beg for food because she was left with either Addict or the felon. I knew I could bury her. Steve, on the other hand, had all of his accounts locked down. I couldn't find any dirt and it was driving me crazy. Then it hit me to try LinkedIn. It paid off. There wasn't much posted, but through his account I found Maria, his ex-wife's account. I reached out to her and she happily accepted. Maria and I became fast friends. She hated Pepper, for good reason, as they had both abandoned her kids like my daughter was and didn't want her around her kids. I learned so much. To keep it short, Maria and Steve had recently divorced. As a part of the custody agreement, Steve got the house, the car, the bank account, the savings account, and a lower than usual child support. Maria had traded all of that money to have control of the kids. She knew he was a scumbag, and all she was concerned with was keeping her kids safe. They had a very detailed custody agreement with rules for Steve to follow. As a part of that agreement, if Steve broke any rules, then he had to pay and pay dearly. He had to sell the house and give her half of everything. His child support would also double, and Steve would be financially ruined. Steve also didn't have her blocked on social media and would regularly send texts bragging about how great his life was without her. Many of those texts had pictures of Pepper in them. We compared notes, we swapped evidence, and we came up with a plan. And now it's time for revenge. First, I got with Jason. He let the FBI investigator know that I had also had some hacking attempts and we believed it was the same person. The investigator called quick. I gave him all the information I had and who I believed was doing it. And he asked a weird question. Do I know where Steve worked? Well, yes, I did, thanks to Maria. So apparently, Steve wasn't as good of a hacker as he thought himself to be. They had already traced back the hack on Jason to a business, the very same business that Steve worked for. As soon as my conversation with the FBI was done, I called his work to lodge a complaint. I told the manager that someone was trying to hack me and I was sure that it was Steve. They, of course, did not take it seriously because I had no proof. What they didn't know was that they were soon going to be getting a visit from a special agent. The next week was absolute hell for Steve and Pepper. Pepper got served with the divorce papers, and her lawyer got served with all the evidence I had gathered. My lawyer said it was the most complete investigation he had ever seen. I had all 40 tardies and 19 absences tied to nights out drinking with Steve. I had hard proof of them abandoning my daughter for days at a time. Maria even gave me a picture that was taken at 2 a.m. the night before the emergency hearing with Steve and Pepper drinking in a tattoo parlor. The same hearing that she was late to, and said that it was due to a disability. Steve got served that he had violated the entire custody agreement. Maria had pictures from me proving that he was with Pepper on nights when the kids were with him and that they were left alone. She also had proof that there was contact with Pepper that violated the custody agreement. The fallout was awesome to watch. Steve was fired. Between my complaints, another older complaint of him hacking, and the FBI showing up, they had no choice but to fire him. He did avoid any legal issues as the FBI never tied it to him directly, but the word spread of why he was fired and no one would hire him in an IT job again. He had to sell the house, liquidate all the investments and bank accounts, and give half to Maria. His child support, on the other hand, stayed the same since he no longer had a source of income. Last I heard, he was working at a grocery store, so his total income went from $200,000 a year to less than $40,000 a year. As for Pepper, the divorce was swift and painful for her. The judge ruled in my favor for all accounts. I got sole custody and sole decision making. She was forced to go to counseling, and her, an addict, can only visit Sarah with a third-party supervisor paid for by Pepper. Sarah is doing much better. She still needs counseling, but she thrives in school and has many friends. She very rarely sees her mom, but she is much better off without her. So, am I the jerk? It's a dangerous thing to get a scorned ex-husband and a scorned ex-wife together when they're both working towards the same goal against the people that they used to be married to. Individually, they each had a good amount of evidence to go down the path of trying to ruin their ex, but when they were combined, they had everything they needed. As the lawyer said, this was the most complete investigation he had ever seen. Just the fact that he put two and two together and connected all of the tardiness and the absences with nights that she had been out is a lot further beyond what most people would ever end up doing because of how time consuming it would be to put something like that together. I mean, honestly, I'm surprised that the OP here took Pepper back when she had already separated from him and gotten with Steve. I mean, he does say originally that he was madly in love with her and he was playing this sort of best friend role where she was telling him when she hooked up with Steve for the first time. And then after she did all that, she said she was in love with him, the OP, and he accepted only to have her change her mind after that summer was over. And this whole thing about Steve being an ethical hacker, I have a feeling she's the one who asked Steve to do this hacking against the OP and the OP's friend, which ultimately cost him his job and led to the violation of the entire agreement he had with Maria, his ex-wife. But what makes Pepper think that if Steve's willing to do that against the OP, that he wouldn't use it against Pepper at one point in the future? Especially if she decides once again she's madly in love with someone else. I know a lot of people were saying that this revenge went way too far. The guy went from having a $200,000 a year job to working in a grocery store for less than $40,000, and he had to liquidate all his assets and then everything that happened to Pepper as well. But do you think it was too far, or do you think this was justified? Let me know down below, and jerk or not a jerk, and why. I ruined a marriage and my family for revenge. I've always been the black sheep of the family. Cousins grew up to be doctors, professors, creatives, whatever else. Meanwhile, I've just managed to make a humble, stable, passive income through some business decisions. Nothing fancy, but I can afford a 1-bedroom in New York City and live comfortably with that, and a part-time job in a cafe. Everyone in the family, including my own parents, judge me harshly for not pushing myself to do what my cousins do, especially my one cousin that we'll call Randy. Think the stereotypical dude bro who got rich thanks to working for his dad. Multiply that by 10 and then you get Randy. Anyway, he always give me the most crap, and eventually I just tune them out because I get to enjoy my life with my significant other, work part-time, and still afford what I want. So to cut the nonsense short, Randy had a wife and 2 kids. He also had a mistress. I found this out because one day I was walking through the city when I saw him walking down the street with a woman who clearly was not his wife, arms around each other. I checked Facebook and saw he had indeed posted about visiting a bagel shop in the city while on a business trip that morning, so we head into the city. I decide, why not? Let me see how this plays out. I followed them for 5 hours, snapped several photos, one of them going into a hotel together. I held on to these and waited until Christmas that year, about 6 months later. I decided to unceremoniously draw printed photos in front of everyone at the table before dinner and made sure to get his wife to see them. Cue screaming and fighting. I actually got a black eye out of it. It was Randy's dad who did it, though not him. Cue police. A lot of questioning. My significant other and I get kicked out. We head back home after talking to the cops one last time. The aftermath. Besides Randy's wife and another cousin who hates Randy, my family cut me off entirely for several years. Whatever. Even my parents had always expressed disappointment in me for not applying myself fully, so no real loss there. Randy got divorced. He lost full custody of the kids after threatening his ex. The family occasionally tries to guilt me into apologizing, but my response is some variation of, I'm not going to apologize for outing a cheating jerk, and I'm promptly blocked for another few months. Significant other and Randy's ex-wife are good friends, and the kids call me uncle. Nice having a family who actually loves me unconditionally for once. Significant other and I got married, and that's when my family last tried to get in contact with me, and we were actually nice for once. Seeing me move on, I guess, eats at them. I don't know. Maybe realizing their punching bag is gone for good. That's it really, living my best life with a good family as opposed to a terrible one. A bunch of y'all seem to think that being abused is not traumatic or bad, as several comments seem to be saying, wow, you're a bad person for having a negative reaction to this and not handling it like a golden human being. So I'll clarify. The comments about my wasted potential weren't just, oh, your cousin's a doctor, what about you? They were, I can't believe Randy just sealed the deal for X amount of dollars. Are you still working at that crappy cafe? Are you still seeing what's her name, the girl with the pudgy stomach? Aren't you ever gonna do anything with your life? I'd feel so worthless living like that. Those are some of the nicer ones. The worst ones include being told that it's better that I didn't try, as I wouldn't amount to anything, and other such things along those lines, as I really don't care to remember the more toxic lines. I'm not interested in judgment. Go post threads if you want to say your piece about that, but don't tell me I wasn't a victim and wasn't treated horribly by my own family just because I didn't spell out the nitty-gritty details. So, am I the jerk? In the aftermath, when the OP says that his significant other and Randy's ex-wife are good friends and the kids call him uncle, I can see why Randy's ex-wife would think that they are good friends, since she really dodged a bullet by knowing about this cheating instead of spending who knows how many years in the dark thinking that their marriage was totally okay, but Randy was just lying to her and keeping up this life with the other mistress. And it sounds like the OP's family really got to him over time. They were saying really cruel things to try and put him down throughout years and years, and whether or not he really cared about Randy's wife or ex-wife, it sounds like he would have done this either way because he wanted to get back at his family as a whole. So let me know how you see this. Do you think this revenge was justified and jerk or not a jerk, and why? An entitled woman sees my husband in a store, basically falls in love with him, and demands that he leave me to be with her. When I arrive, she tries to fight me, and whoever the winner is gets to be with my husband. Then there's puke involved. Let me explain what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. When my now adult daughter was almost 3 years old, we had a regular monthly family dinner plan. We would go to a used bookstore that was near a Mexican place we liked and a McDonald's which our kids liked. The Mexican restaurant would let us sit on the porch and bring Happy Meals there for the kids. One night, our son, older than our daughter, was at a sleepover, so we were a party of 3. After eating, we went to the used bookstore. We had a stroller with us so that our daughter could sit in it if she got too tired. She was an easy kid who would just climb into the little stroller and chill or snooze if we were not done browsing. I was looking at cookbooks while my husband was in the kids section with our daughter. I I noticed some redheaded chick talking to my husband. I went back to the books for a couple of minutes, and when I look up, the woman is still talking, but more talking at him than to him. He was starting to look very uncomfortable. I can tell she is hitting on him by the way he held up his hand and pointed to his wedding ring. Being me, I let this play out for a few minutes, mostly to laugh about this with him later. As I watch, my daughter goes to him and wraps her arms around him. She gives this woman the nastiest look I had ever seen on her face. I start walking over because I can tell that my daughter is about to say something to this woman that I will either laugh at or need to intervene because of. As I get almost to them, my daughter tells the woman that her daddy already has a mommy for her and that if she doesn't get away from him, she is going to puke on her. My daughter always has had the ability to vomit at will. She had already weaponized it against one of my male relatives with a weak stomach. The woman, not knowing that I was behind her, told my daughter that her daddy didn't have a mommy to go with him, and daddies needed mommies. My daughter looked at me with a look that clearly said, "She is an idiot. Get her away from me now." I walk past the woman and up to my husband. I put my arm around him and lean into him. Then I put the hand wearing my wedding ring up on his chest as I look at her. The redhead doesn't have the sense to just leave the area. She had to start a rant about how I should have been right by him if I wanted to keep him, how he should go with her and divorce me because she would never be away from him, and how I don't deserve a man and she does. So she is just going to replace me and raise my kids as her own. I looked up at my husband and he asked how we kept getting these weirdos that have elevators that don't go all the way up to want to replace me. The redheaded chick loses it and starts saying that she wants to fight me over him, that whichever of us wins will get to keep him. I asked her if she seriously thought I would bother with a fight. He was already mine and I don't believe in fights. I just shoot to kill. Then this lunatic starts screaming at me that I am trying to kill her. At that point, my daughter had enough. She walked over to the lady and waited until the stupid woman bent down to talk to her. Then my daughter puked all over her and sort of up onto her neck so that when she stood up, lots of the puke ran down her shirt. Staff was already on the way over and wanted to know why the lady was screaming. I told them she was hitting on my husband and then wanted to fight me for him. I didn't even know why she suddenly started saying that I wanted to kill her or to shoot her. I didn't even own a gun. She was just being an idiot. Then she got my daughter all upset, so my daughter puked. I cleaned our daughter up and had to rinse out her mouth. On the way home, my husband insisted that we stop and buy her some ice cream. When I asked my daughter why she thought she needed to puke on the lady, my daughter told me that we had already wasted enough time talking and clearly it wasn't going anywhere, so she ended it. My daughter has always had a way of cutting through the garbage in life. So, am I the jerk for how I handled this? What should I have done? There's got to be something seriously wrong with somebody who says, after learning that they're already married, well, I'll just fight the person that you're married to, and then I'll get married to you. As if that has any bearing on what the marriage is at all, or what the relationship is at all. It reminds me of the mentality of a boy in middle school. He thinks that if the pretty girl sees him fight somebody, then she'll magically just like him out of nowhere. One of the top responses was actually a story that somebody responded to this with. I had something similar happen with myself and my longtime boyfriend, now husband. We moved to a new neighborhood and attended the neighborhood Halloween party. I was finishing up setting out candy for the early trick-or-treaters and arrived later than my boyfriend and my son. I find my boyfriend in a conversation with a woman that I'd never seen before, and that's cool because again, we were new to the neighborhood. Except my son comes up to me and tells me that the lady is flirting with my boyfriend. Ha, I think. She doesn't realize he's attached. Okay, so I go up, smiling and friendly, and my boyfriend immediately introduces me as his long-term girlfriend, and he makes sure to mention twice that we had just moved here together, hoping that she would get the hint. I should mention that my boyfriend is 16 years older than me, successful and very attractive. Women are always hitting on him. It's just a part of life, and most of the time we laugh it off or I remind him that he's a silver fox. This lady, she took the cake. As soon as my boyfriend walked away, she began aggressively interrogating me about what I did for a living.
Oh, you only do that? Haha, I'd be a much better partner for someone like him because I do X, Y, and Z and understand him better.
I am totally taken aback by her sheer audacity. She continues and even follows me around the park where the party was and finally got visibly and verbally angry with me for stealing a man her age from her, which was insane. She asked me what my plans were with him, so I decided to deal with her and I replied, I don't have any plans. I'm just using him for loud, dirty, nasty sessions of doing the deed. Nice to meet you. Have a good day. She was so shocked she tripped. She never bothered us again, which was nice. At least in the second story, the other woman didn't try and fight the OP in some sort of winner-take-all battle royale. But if a situation like this were to happen in your own life, with your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your wife, your husband, whatever, and somebody who knows that they're with you is aggressively trying to flirt with them, trying to get them to leave you, how would you handle that situation? Let me know down below in Jerk or Not a Jerk and why. Am I the jerk for telling my girlfriend to get rid of her creepy dummy? I'm a 22-year-old male, my girlfriend is 21. She loves horror. She told me about 3 months ago that she read Goosebumps in elementary school, and it sparked a lifelong interest in horror, and that when she was a kid, all she ever wanted for birthdays and Christmas was a replica of Slappy, the creepy ventriloquist dummy. I'm kind of a wimp about that stuff, and I think the dummy thing is frankly insane, but I like her enough to ignore it. Until last week, her birthday, when her mother bought her a Slappy replica. She's afraid of dummies, hence why she never got it for her as a kid. My girlfriend was thrilled. You would have thought her mom had handed her the keys to a Tesla with the way that she was acting. She was literally crying with happiness. When she saw the expensive necklace that I got her, she just said, "Thank you." She is totally obsessed with the dummy. Her roommate thinks it's hilarious, and she carries it around her apartment like a teddy bear and even sleeps with it on her bed. I kind of snapped last night when I went over and she was holding the dummy when I answered the door. I told her it was creepy and she was being weird about it and she needed to get rid of it. I'll admit, I raised my voice a little bit. My girlfriend started crying and her roommate told me to leave. My roommate and friends have been texting me saying I'm not supporting her and the dummy is harmless. My girlfriend herself hasn't reached out to me, so am I the jerk? This story isn't over because in a strange turn of events, the people that this post was about actually ended up seeing this post and replied, "LMAO Matt, did you seriously not think either of us would see this post? You only learned about this subreddit because V showed you some of the posts in here in an attempt to get you to engage in any of her interests. Makes sense why you only care about it when it could benefit you. I don't know whether this is some passive-aggressive power move to get V to text you back, or if you're just that desperate for someone to agree with you. But either way, I don't think it's working out like you hoped. Certainly works well for me since now I don't have to worry about biting my tongue for her sake." Then the section was quoted that said, "Until last week, her birthday, when her mother bought her a Slappy replica, my girlfriend was thrilled, and when I gave her a necklace, she just said thank you." They continued by saying, "Of course she was excited. It's something that she had wanted for years, and the fact that it came from her mother also made it special since she hates the thing. And you can act all wounded about her not being as thrilled about the necklace, but we both know that you're intentionally leaving out the fact that V told you in the past that she doesn't like wearing jewelry. She doesn't like how a lot of it looks and she has sensory problems with it. And no one asked you to spend $1,000 on a necklace that looks like an Amazon logo for a girl that you've been with for less than 7 months, dude. To be honest, it was just kind of weird." Quoting the part where he said, "I kind of just snapped last night when I went over and she was holding the dummy when she answered the door." Kind of, a little bit, you blew up. The people from across the way came to check in on us after you left because of your yelling. Rather than talking to your girlfriend and expressing your reservations like a normal person, you bottled it up and then let it out on her with no warning. I know for sure V is done with you, but honestly, for the sake of your future relationships, I hope that you grow up and learn to communicate without alerting everyone in the building of your issues. Also, get better taste. Goosebumps is awesome. You're the jerk." Oof, this person came in and lit the OP up. Posts like these always remind me that there's always a bit of bias from the person telling the story because it's their perspective. From the way the OP sees it, he did this really kind thing and bought her a very expensive necklace that cost $1,000, which is pretty wild from both perspectives, but from the perspective of the other person, they think it's weird because it's been less than 7 months, but more importantly, it's something that he's buying for her because he thinks that she should like it instead of listening to her actual interests, which include Slappy the dummy. I mean, they even point to that in the section before where they say you only learned about this because V showed you some of the posts in here in an attempt to get you to engage in any of her interests. And then of course the fact that he got way more mad at the opening of the door holding the dummy than he originally explained. And by the way, if you want to see a picture of the dummy, I'll throw it on the Am I the Jerk Twitter account. So now you see two perspectives on this story. Let me know what side of the fence you sit on, and jerk or not a jerk, and why. Am I the jerk for dropping our dinner on the ground and walking out when my boyfriend asked me, "What's for dinner tonight, B?" I was over at my boyfriend's apartment this weekend and I was cooking dinner because he was studying for exams. I made pasta and chunky sauce with meatballs and veggies. I told him dinner was ready and he goes, "What's for dinner tonight, B?" with a lot of emphasis on the last word. I was fed up. I had a pretty rough day with work and I have some awfully bad associations with that word being used by other people in my life who were pretty terrible. So I was so irritated that I dropped the pot of pasta sauce that I'd been carrying right on the ground and said, "Well, nothing's for dinner tonight now, and I better not hear you use that word again. It's for the girls." He was freaking out about how the sauce landed on his rug and he even said, "You're seriously acting like a bee right now. I don't know what else to call it." I just walked out and got takeout for myself and I went to my friend's house. She thought it was funny, but my boyfriend was furious. He kept texting and calling and sending me voice memos trying to explain that "What's for dinner B" was a TikTok trend and that he was just quoting something as a joke to put it on TikTok. I thought that was the worst excuse ever. It doesn't matter if he saw it as a joke or stole the joke, it was still disrespectful. But it didn't change the fact that he thought that it was still funny. To demean me while I was trying to do him a favor? Like hell, I come over when he was studying to make a home-cooked dinner and he decides it's time for jokes? So I put my phone on Do Not Disturb for the night and split a bottle of wine with my friend and her roommate. The next morning he was sending me angry texts demanding I clean his rug because he was too busy with exams to do it. I was shocked that he left it overnight. That's disgusting. I texted him back saying, "Yeah, so that's the B tax, honey. Leave me alone until you're ready to handle your own cooking and cleaning because this B isn't anymore. Also, it's vile that you left that soaking in all night." He called me and told me that he was okay with doing his own housework, but I did throw a full pot of sauce at the ground, so that's on me to clean up. I told him, "Yeah, no, I'm not comfortable doing chores for you if you see me like I'm your B." He told me he didn't and it was just a trend, and I got pissed off that he was playing that TikTok trend BS excuse again, and I told him, "Well, I'm starting a trend called saucing, where as a little joke, people throw pasta sauce around. You can't be mad because it's just a little trend, a little jokey joke, just a little prank, bro." He got really pissed and hung up on me, and now I'm seriously wondering if this dumb TikTok joke is going to be the end of things between us. To address some of the comments I've gotten a lot, and I don't have time to reply to everyone, starting with, "But did you tell him not to call you a B? Like, how would he know otherwise?" Honestly, if someone has gone to the age of 30 and not realized that women, as a whole, do not like having demeaning slurs used against them, they're beyond my help. This isn't something that needs to be told. I shouldn't have to go through life like, "Hey man, just in case you were thinking I might like demeaning slurs against my gender used on me, I don't actually, smile." And if you were about to comment something like that, let me just tell you in no uncertain terms, women do not like being called B's by men. Do not call women B's. If you needed to be told that it is unkind, consider yourself officially told. Now you have no excuse not to understand. So, am I the jerk for how I reacted when my boyfriend asked me, "What's for dinner tonight, B?" Her comeback where she said there's a new TikTok trend where they throw pasta on the ground cracked me up. And yeah, how could this guy leave an entire pot of pasta sauce just soaking into the floor the entire night? Depending on what exact material that floor is made out of, it might not ever come out. And does anyone know, is that actually a real TikTok trend? I've never seen that before, but maybe it was in the past at some point. So let me know if this would bother you if your boyfriend or girlfriend called you a B. In this exact context, would it bother you and what would you do? Jerk or not a jerk, and why? Am I the jerk for telling my fiance that he embarrassed me when he started singing the happy birthday song to his 5-year-old son at the restaurant? I'm a 30-year-old female and I've been with my fiance Ned, who's 36, for a year and a half. He has a 5-year-old son with his ex-girlfriend. They don't have a custody arrangement, but he has him most of the week because his mom is currently sick. His son is lovely, but I noticed that Ned takes him everywhere he goes, including places that aren't child-friendly, and we have an issue with that now, but we're working on it. His son's birthday was 5 days ago. Ned took us out to a restaurant to celebrate. The place was nice and looked a bit unfitting for the occasion because it was a somewhat expensive place. Anyways, we ordered the food and then got the birthday cake, which was a surprise to me because I thought we were going to celebrate at home, so we could be free to sing and play however we wanted. I still had no issue with that until Ned started singing the happy birthday song to his son. I was stunned. I almost dropped my plate. He was singing it at the top of his lungs. lungs, not even looking around or paying attention to how many people were staring at us awkwardly. I felt so embarrassed. I kept whispering for him to stop, but he ignored me. Of course, my future stepson was hyped and a little too active, which isn't good when we're in a public place. I expected the staff, the manager, anyone to get involved and stop him, but no one did. In fact, some woman came up to us and offered that she could help him take a video recording. I wasn't in it at all. I froze in my seat, looking stunned and a little angry. He looked at me a little later, asking what was wrong. I didn't say anything except, "Thanks for finally noticing." He didn't understand what I meant, and I didn't explain until we were in the car. I flat out told him that he embarrassed me the second he started singing in the restaurant. He looked shocked, saying he didn't get why I would be embarrassed by him celebrating his son's birthday and cheering him up. I told him we could have done this at home when we'd be more comfortable and free. He took it as in I was ashamed of him and his son, but I denied it and said that it just felt awkward and embarrassing. Maybe because I've never been in this situation before, and also judging from the restaurant we were at. He said that his son's mom is sick and he's trying to do all he can to cheer him up, and that all families do that and no one had an issue with it except me. Then when I tried to explain, he got mad and said he no longer felt like talking. We haven't been speaking since then. It appears he's still salty about me saying what I said and insisting that I see him and his son as an embarrassment. I think he's being too harsh with the whole ignoring me thing instead of talking it out. But am I the jerk? Huh? I don't exactly understand what she's angry about. I get that she's not used to this meaning singing happy birthday in a public restaurant, but it's a little kid. His mom is sick, his parents are separated, he's with his dad, and it's his birthday, and I can't possibly imagine why singing happy birthday to this kid would be anything that would be wrong. Even if you did feel embarrassed, which is perfectly valid, that's what you felt, it's strange to think that your mild, temporary discomfort is worth overriding this little kid's birthday. The way I see this, it really comes down to a question of who gets to have the discomfort. Should it be you, the person telling the story, the adult, or the little kid? And I know the OP probably doesn't see it like that. They see it as some sort of conflict with the dad, but that's the way it seems to boil down to me. The top response to this says he gleefully sang happy birthday to his child whose mother is sick while you sat there sulking in your anger. Are you applying to be the evil stepmother by any chance? You prioritize not being embarrassed over a fun moment between a father and his son. The restaurant staff didn't think it was inappropriate. It doesn't seem that you are a good match for someone with kids. But let me know how you see the situation. Maybe you think that she's totally in the right. Let me know down below, jerk or not a jerk, and why. Am I the jerk for telling my sister she overreacted when she screamed at me for entering her and her husband's room? I'm a 23-year-old female and I'm a full-time college student. Right now I live with my sister Claire and her husband Thomas while I get through my current semester. I don't work, so I don't have everything I need for my daily skin and hair routine, so I borrow stuff from Claire. Claire didn't have an issue in the beginning, but then started complaining about me randomly walking into her room, but I go in there looking for the stuff I asked for. She gave me a hard time just because I walked in on Thomas half exposed to get the eyeshadow that I borrowed from her. And then that other time when I walked in late at night, she told me I needed to get permission from her to enter the room before I take anything, but I figured this would make things complicated. It's enough that I have to ask to borrow an item. So last night at around 10 p.m. I went upstairs and into her bedroom and I grabbed a hairdryer. I walked in and whoops, I saw them in an intimate position together. I had no idea they were doing it, especially since Claire told me that Thomas has been feeling sick the past 2 days. She lashed out at me, yelling that I get out. I quickly grabbed the hairdryer and then walked out and shut the door. Minutes later, she came downstairs in her robe and went off on me, saying that she was done with me repeatedly disrespecting and violating her and her husband's privacy. I told her it was cool, no big deal, and that I needed the dryer, but I didn't have time to ask for permission. She got even louder, saying that I had no business barging into her marital space and embarrassing her and her husband like this. I told her that I was sorry, but she really overreacted to this whole thing. This made her more pissed, and she went on about how I'm living here rent-free and yet not being respectable enough. I stopped arguing and went to my room. This morning, Thomas left the house early, and Claire ignored me at breakfast, still upset, saying that I don't get to say whether she overreacted or not and my behavior was inappropriate. She even wants me to apologize to her husband for making lies last night awkward. Am I the jerk? If you're living at the expense of somebody else completely for free, you're gonna have to live by their house rules, and she's not asking much. All she's saying is, don't come into my room, give me privacy, I'm letting you live here for free, don't do this. But the OP here seems to be hyper-focused on the fact that her sister is overreacting. When you tell someone not to do something and they do it, and then you tell them not to do it again and they do it again, for most people, you're beyond the point of normally reacting. You go into overreacting territory, but it's warranted at that point because she's told the OP multiple times not to do this. It's not that complicated. So who's in the right, who's in the wrong, jerk or not a jerk, and why? My mother was dying, and my girlfriend took that opportunity to cheat on me with a random guy that recently joined her friend group because she knew that I would be distracted with my mother's death. I was the one that walked in on them and saw it with my own eyes, but they didn't see me. So I decided to come up with a plan to literally destroy their lives permanently and do it in a way that they would never know that I was the one behind it. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. I will have to reveal and admit a few things about myself I'd rather not, and I'm not proud of. If you hate or struggle with reading, then don't even continue. My story is unfortunately true, and I would not wish my life upon anyone, not even those I chose to seek out revenge upon. When I was 18 years old, my father suffered a debilitating stroke and could never work or drive again. I volunteered to look after him as my mother had a full-time job. My family needed her to keep working. Sadly, exactly 1 year to the day of his stroke, he passed away after enduring a triple bypass. I lost it, as we used to say back in the day, and it changed something inside of me. I had lived a somewhat sheltered life due to regularly attending church and church activities. When my father passed, if I wanted to go to college, I would have to pay for it out of pocket. I did not qualify for any loans. Thankfully, in retrospect, I got a menial job and began to party at age 19, having never tasted alcohol, done illegal substances, or have ever done the deed before. I had been bullied quite a bit growing up. I had developed very late and always looked several years younger than my friends. At a party one night, I met a guy several years older than me. We'll call him Benji. He asked me to come by after my shift and my terrible minimum wage job the next day, and I agreed. When I arrived, he brought me into his house where two of his friends were busy snorting through a table of white powder. I'd seen illegal substances in movies, so I rightfully assumed it was coke. They offered a line and laughed at my refusal to try it. The reason Benji had singled me out was the fact that even at age 19, I looked like I should have been a freshman or sophomore in high school. The dealer and his guys had kids selling the white powder at all of the local high schools. The area that I'm from had a lot of old wealth and trust fund kids. They wanted me to go to each high school campus each day and pick up cash while dropping off pre-weighed bags of coke. They would buy packs of cigarettes and put coke in each with a small initial on the bottom indicating which school. They'd gotten their hands on a cellophane wrapping machine that would seal and shrink the plastic. Everything worked well as planned for years. It was amazing to learn how many cops, lawyers, and even judges were on the take. I did things in those younger days that could have gotten me a very long prison sentence, or worse had I been caught. I quit my stupid job and worked daily for Benji. If I wasn't delivering or weighing, Benji and his buddies were teaching me how to blast gats, work out, or fight. They'd built a full-size boxing ring out back because they truly loved to spar. They sensed I'd been picked on a lot growing up. Even though I'd grown another 3 inches in height after high school to stand at 6'2", I was still wiry and not very strong. Benji was several years older than me and had been stationed in South Korea for many years. There, he took it upon himself to learn a form of martial arts known as subak, but he'd also been a boxer as well. The three guys loved teaching me how to handle myself. They'd teach me to master one move, then delighted in springing a new, never-before-seen move on me. None of this was ever meant to attack anyone, strictly self-defense. They wanted to be sure I could protect myself should anything bad go down, and wanted me to be able to have their backs. Benji made me carry a loaded 9mm everywhere we drove. He carried a huge .357 Magnum revolver. Eventually, I was several years into college and had begun to sell to classmates. My mom was proud I was paying for my own tuition and books, never asking how. Yes, there are some people, albeit very few, that use money earned from unsavory deeds to better themselves, just as as there are a few strippers who use that money to get a degree. It is rare, but it does happen. What my mom never knew was the fact that I was making more money in a week selling these substances than she did as a teacher in an entire month. I drove an old Camry. I never bought flashy clothes or threw money around to impress anyone. I kept as low of a profile as I could. I finished my bachelor's degree in 3 years due to having plenty of free time. I initially wanted to be a lawyer, but I had known far too many corrupt cops and judges. I did study law with no goal of ever passing the bar because I wanted to become and eventually became a jury consultant. For those that don't know what that is, when a law firm has a client they are defending, a list of potential jurors is sent out. Television makes it look like lawyers decide for or against potential jurors on the spot in court. A good lawyer already has a very good idea of each potential juror's background before they enter the room. My job was to take each name and research any background I could find. The firm I worked for decided what was pertinent information for each particular case. The firm I work for has the highest regard in my area. I can research a lot of information about people legally through something as simple as an online background data site. In the much more recent past, I reacquainted with a high school classmate we'll call Shayna. I discovered that she and I both had crushes on each other back in the day, but we'd both been too shy to say a word to each other. Without a lot of pointless details, suffice it to say, Shayna and I became best friends, fell head over heels in love, and were planning a future together. Both of our previous relationships had been disasters. Mine in particular had left me feeling totally dead inside, believing that I was incapable of love. It had been years since I had dated by choice. My previous ex, we'll call Allison, had done things cold and utterly heartless to cause our breakup. I was nothing but good to her, rescuing her from a toxic relationship, never abused her, and let her know no human deserves to be abused. When she stabbed me in the back and left me, my life was in total ruin. Finding Shayna didn't just give me hope, it made me realize that every relationship before her had been pointless. Shayna was the love of my lifetime. We were meant to be together, and finally were. Sadly, 5 years ago, I awoke to discover Shayna was not beside me. I thought nothing of it until I went into the laundry room to find her face down on the floor. When I picked her up, even before I turned her over, I knew something was wrong. Her body was completely stiff. When I did turn her over, I realized she was dead. Rigor mortis had already set in, and her face was frozen in the most painful expression of agony you could imagine. I called 911 even knowing that she was already dead and long past saving. I really don't want to go into the detail about that night. Suffice it to say, the cops suspected I'd done something or she'd OD'd. For 5 hours, detectives went through everything we owned. I was questioned repeatedly, the same questions by multiple cops, all while I was trying to console her mother with the realization that her one and only daughter was dead. The next day, I accompanied Shayna's mother to Shayna's neurologist. Shayna had epilepsy and her doctor suspected that she might have died from SUDEP, sudden unexpected death due to epilepsy, which neither of us had ever heard of. Months later, when the autopsy came back, that was the cause of death. The next few days were a blur of misery, tears, and disbelief. Devastated does not begin to express how I felt from that point for many, many months. I will not lie, there were many moments I thought of and even planned to end it. I knew Shayna would want me to live, and after seeing how the loss of a child had affected her mother, I could not do that to my own mom. I managed to face the future only by focusing on my mother, who was getting up in years at the time. I closed myself off to all friends and extended family. It was hard enough just having the fortitude to hold down my job and look after my mom. I worked out every day and did cycling for cardio. I took some Krav Maga classes to relieve stress, but I didn't even think of dating, and frankly, the idea seemed pointless. Shayna was truly a special person with a beautiful soul. I knew I could never have that kind of relationship with anyone ever again. Eventually, 2 years passed and I met a female we will call Angie. We initially started hanging out as friends again, as that is what I needed the most at the time. But as I opened up about what happened with Allison and then Shayna, we got closer and Angie seemed to sympathize. We started sleeping together and eventually became a couple. I was still having to keep some of the focus on my mother, though I enjoyed my time with Angie. She seemed to appreciate that I actually listened, spoke honestly, and was protective of her. She said that she loved me, and I admitted I loved her. I never told her a word about how I'd paid for college or the things I'd seen or done. Shayna knew and loved me in spite of it all. While I knew that it would never be what Shayna and I had, I never told or even hinted at that to Angie. Things went along for the most part. My mother's need for assistance was fairly limited. Angie knew what I'd endured losing Shayna, and she seemed to understand the responsibility I had looking after my mom. Angie and I had been in a committed, monogamous relationship for well over a year when my mother had to have some medical tests done. My mom had a leaking heart valve, and the tests were done to determine if they could repair the valve. A week later, we received good news. The valve could indeed be replaced. However, we also received devastating news. While running the tests, they discovered 4 small masses in and around her right kidney. The odds were high that the masses were tumors and malignant. The doctors did a biopsy to discover she did in fact have renal kidney cancer. She began chemotherapy, and I knew my focus needed to be on my mom. Things had been great with Angie. We were planning on moving in together. She lived in a town about 30 miles from me. When I told Angie about my mom, she seemed deeply concerned and supportive. When I explained it meant we would see less of each other, she assured me that she had no desire to put things between us on hold. She said she wanted to be there for me if in no other way as emotional support. I told Angie, in fact, I urged Angie that if she decided she wanted to take a break or thought she might be interested in anyone she met, just to tell me, and I would understand. She assured me that she cherished me in her life and that nobody could ever take my place in her life. Initially, the chemotherapy seemed to be having none of the horrible side effects. It was well into her 2nd month before she started noticing weakness and a loss of appetite. I talked to and texted Angie multiple times every day. She would message me asking me how my mom was doing as soon as she woke up each morning, and we often spent hours before falling asleep talking and telling each other how much they were missed to each other. We got to see and spend the night together about every 2 weeks, but everything seemed fine when we did. My mom's condition began to worsen, so I told Angie that she should go out with friends and have some enjoyment in life. As summer began, I knew Angie would enjoy going to outdoor activities even without me. My mom's failing health that summer meant no fun in the sun for me. Angie would go out with friends, and I enjoyed hearing about the silly things she and her friends did. I was genuinely glad that she wasn't being a shut-in over issues in my life. She always expressed concern and sadness each time I told her what was going on with my mom. The chemo was in fact killing the cancer cells. However, she was growing more and more frail. I realized the cancer was no longer killing my mom, the medicine was. I needed to take a break, so a group of ladies from my mom's church came to sit with her to give me a little free time on my own. I called Angie as I was nearing her town. She gave me the address of where her and her friends were at so I could meet with them. When I arrived, I saw most of her friends, which I'd already met. As I made my way through the house to the back deck, I saw a guy sitting very close to Angie. They were both laughing and cutting up with other friends. She introduced me as her boyfriend to the guy, Will. He shook my hand, insisting he was glad to meet me. I was cordial to him. I don't think Angie suspected I immediately felt something was amiss with Will. I suppose many people get a gut feeling when they encounter someone shifty. Due to my own criminal activity many years before, my takes one to know one instincts told me there was something shady about Will. I knew he was new to their group of friends. None of them, including Angie, had known him longer than a couple of months. I must be clear that I know now what I felt at the time was not jealousy. Angie had many male friends, all of whom I genuinely liked, but there was something I sensed about Will that made me a bit skeptical about his character. I tried my best to ignore it, writing the feeling off as mere jealousy. I began to talk with Angie and her friends, trying to put my mind at ease. I monitored Will from afar and interacted with him cordially. Angie and I stayed at her place that night before I had to leave to head home. Over the next several weeks, my mother's condition began to worsen, but Angie and I spoke and texted throughout the day, every day. In hindsight, I now realize I was initiating most of our conversation, but at the time, I wasn't keeping count. One day, a few relatives volunteered to look after my mom to give me a break. I headed to see Angie, calling her on the way. She told me what restaurant she and her friends were having dinner at, so I made my way there. I was pulling into a parking space and I saw Will get into a late model black Mustang. He pulled out, though he didn't see me since he was unfamiliar with my car. I made my way inside where Angie and her friends greeted me with hugs and words of sympathy and encouragement. We all had dinner and a few drinks before Angie and I went back to her place. Before bed, I casually asked why Will had left before I got to say hello. Angie stated that she had no idea Will had even been at the restaurant. The place we'd eaten was in a strip mall next to several other businesses. I thought perhaps he had come out of one of those stores and neither Angie nor her friends had seen him. At any rate, I again stayed with her that night before heading back to my place at about noon. The next day, my mom had become very ill and had to be taken to the hospital via ambulance. She had pneumonia and was extremely weak due to the chemo and susceptible to many ailments. For 3 weeks, she was hospitalized. They gave her many medications via an IV, but her condition worsened each day. The doctors finally informed me that she had at most a week to live. I knew she would not want to leave this earth in that hospital room, so the staff made arrangements for hospice to bring her home and help me make her last few days as peaceful as possible. When everything had been set up, we brought my mom home. Though extremely weak, she was glad to see her house and familiar settings once again. We both knew she didn't have much longer to live. While she was a bit afraid, she also told me she was ready to go and see my father once again after so long. I got one of my cousins to look after my mom for a few hours, got in my car and drove to see Angie without calling. I hadn't called because I was crying so hard facing my mom's impending demise. I wouldn't have been able to talk. When I arrived at Angie's house, I saw a black Mustang parked in her driveway behind her car. I actually didn't think anything of it as I was so focused on soon losing my mother. I used the key she had given me to enter the kitchen, as we always did. As soon as the door opened, I heard loud music playing, but still didn't really suspect anything. I saw no one in the living room or on the back deck. I walked down the hallway towards her bedroom and heard noises coming from inside. As I reached for the door handle, I stopped. I realized the sounds I heard were intimate in nature. My heart sank even further as I pulled back my hand, not wanting to draw attention. Her bathroom was connected to a guest room with an adjoining bathroom. I quietly walked around and into the unlit bathroom to find her bedroom door open. I stopped in my tracks as I saw them both completely naked going at it, oblivious to my presence. Honestly, my first instinct was to run full speed and introduce his face to the back of his skull with my knee. But I knew I had to stay out of trouble for the sake of my mother and my job, so I slowly backed away, shaking with anger. I went back through the guest room, out of the house, and to my car. I hadn't been seen. I just sat there in the car, bawling my eyes out. About half an hour later, I cranked my car and headed back to my mom's. I told no one what I'd just seen. Everyone assumed my tears were totally in regard to my mom. They of course partially were, but the betrayal I'd just seen was something so sadistic I struggled to grasp it. My logic knew my mom was my top priority, especially so close to the end. Yet I felt so deceived by Angie. I felt a rage like I've never known before, and I'd felt plenty of rage. I thought of calling Angie, letting her know what I'd seen and cursing her out, but I knew if she didn't care enough to be faithful to me while my mother was on her deathbed, a steam of profanity wouldn't bother her. I made sure my mother was comfortable and went to try and sleep in my old childhood room. I cried, I slept. I woke up crying and cried some more throughout the night. I awoke to my cell phone ringing and saw that it was Angie. I ignored the call and the urge to slam the phone against the wall. I went in to check on my mom, who was in a deep sleep due to the morphine sulfate they had her on. I managed to text Angie. I was very busy with my mom and would call her later. After forcing myself to eat food that I didn't want and eating a shower, the hospice nurses came by to check on my mom. After checking her vital signs, they regretfully informed me that my mother would die within 48 hours. I thanked them and walked into the backyard, trying to not totally lose my mind with all that had happened and was about to happen. I managed to text Angie and told her my mother's condition was about the same. I didn't want to see her, I didn't want to talk to her, and I didn't want her showing up. I owed it to my mother to do everything I could to make sure her last moments were as peaceful as I could. The next afternoon, just before 4 p.m., my mother took her last breath with me by her side, holding her hand as her life expired. The next 3 days, I was in a total daze, meeting with her pastor and making final touches on the church and burial service, but I could not for the life of me get the images of Angie and Will fornicating right in front of me out of my mind. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I was mad at Angie, furious, but remembering how Will had been so overly friendly toward me made my blood boil even more. If they hadn't already been intimate when I first met him, they were soon about to. That made me want to know just exactly who this guy was. I opened the site I used for background checks. I hadn't checked him out before because I wanted to trust Angie and her decision making. I'd sensed from the moment I met him he was bad news. I actually was angry at myself for ignoring my gut instincts. I knew nothing but his first and last name. It was a distinct last last name and I had difficulty spelling it correctly. When I finally got it right, a link popped up which I opened to see an old mugshot of Will's face from many years before. I was once arrested and have done some despicable things in my life. I've known people who have done horrible things intentionally and under the influence of various substances. But Will had a long rap sheet for a variety of crimes. Several DWIs, receiving stolen goods, breaking and entering, and drug arrests were listed. As I scrolled down through his record, the arrests got more heinous. I discovered that Will had been out of prison on early probation approximately 2 years after serving 9 years. When I saw the charges, they included exploitation of a minor and several other offenses of a similar nature. I admit I was disgusted. Angie had betrayed me, which hurt enough. The knowledge she may have risked me to God only knew what diseases that felon had gotten as a fiend, and then eventually in prison made me feel physically ill. I doubted Angie had any idea who she was involved with behind my back. She had a naive, trusting nature that had given her issues before, but never like that. I had no doubt anyone who knew of Will's record would have considered him a vile creature. He should have never been let out of prison, but I had my mom's funeral to focus on and had to pull myself together. By the time her funeral was over and everyone had left, I was exhausted and mentally spent. As I put my head on the pillow and tried to sleep, Angie called, not knowing my mom had passed away or that I knew what she had been up to. And that's when it was time to put my revenge in motion. It went way further than I ever expected it to and literally ruined the lives of both Will and Angie. I didn't want for it to go that far, but in the end, she deserved it. The next section is the revenge, and since it's very long, part 2 will be linked at the top of the description of this video. Part 2 is wild. You definitely want to see it, and it's going to come out the same day as this video comes out, so chances are by the time you're listening to this, it's already out. But either way, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything. This story is devastating. The original poster here even makes it so clear to Angie that if she doesn't want to wait around for him or she meets somebody while waiting for him, just to let him know. But the fact that she wanted her cake and to eat it too is just sad. This poor guy is going through the traumatic death of his own mother and then visually witnesses his girlfriend doing this with basically a random guy, some guy who just recently started hanging out with their group of friends. Something about the way that this whole scene is described reminds me of the movie SLC Punk, except in this story, the OP doesn't immediately engage. In SLC Punk, he basically jumps in and tries to beat up the guy right in the moment. And that's kind of what I thought was going to happen because of all the mention of the fight training and everything that led up to this. It's pretty unusual to hear somebody talking about subak, which is an old Korean martial art, but it makes sense how that would have been passed down to him because the guy was stationed in Korea. I mean, all Angie had to do was say, hey, I don't think I'm going to wait around while you're going through this whole situation with your mom, or just say, hey, I found this other guy and I want to be with this guy instead. Because the OP even said, are you sure? Is this what you want to do? Either of these things individually can completely crush someone, and the fact that they both happened at the same time, the cheating and the death of the mother, that has got to be exponentially more painful. And that pain is what breeds the anger that we see in part 2, where he really takes the gloves off and goes all out in getting revenge against the two of them. It's honestly pretty intense how far he takes the revenge. So make sure you don't miss that when it comes out. It's linked at the top of the description. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and check it out. My girlfriend took the opportunity to cheat on me while my mother was dying with a guy who was just released from jail, thinking that I would be distracted with my mother's death. When I caught them, I never let them know that I knew. I did some research and found out that the guy that she cheated on me with had a long rap sheet with tons of previous crimes. So I decided to use all of that in my revenge plan. That's a very short summary of part 1, which you can listen to via the link at the top of the description in much more detail. But this is where part 2 begins. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. He should have never been let out of prison, but I had my mom's funeral to focus on and had to pull myself together. By the time her funeral was over and everyone had left, I was exhausted and mentally spent. As I put my head on the pillow and tried to sleep, Angie called, not knowing my mom had passed away or that I knew what she had been up to. She'd been texting and calling much less in the days before my discovery and after. I answered the phone and tried my best to sound as glad to hear from her as I could. I didn't let on what had changed with my mom's status, nor that I knew about her and Will, or that I knew about Will. I let her do most of the talking talking and internalized every word I knew to be a lie, as if I totally believed her and appreciated her false sympathy. When she claimed she missed me as we said goodbye, I lied and told her the same. But in all honesty, at that moment, if she'd dropped dead, I would have not cared in the least. I had a few weeks off from work with bereavement. I knew things with Angie were over and done with. Part of me couldn't help but struggle with how cruelly she had treated me, intentionally or not. I was glad to know the truth about her and about Will before any further lies and betrayal could occur. But I felt what both of them had done to me at a time when I was struggling to keep it together was just flat out wrong. I wanted revenge. I wanted to destroy both of their lives and yet never let either of them know that I had any part of it. I called my human resources department and filled out the necessary FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, paperwork to stay out longer than my given 2 weeks. I truly had no reason to worry about getting fired, but I took the legal route and had enough of a nest egg to pay my bills for half a year or more if I needed to. Revenge on Will was quite easy. As he was on parole and a felon, even a minor charge would get him sent back to prison to finish his original sentence. But I didn't want him just to have to finish out his original sentence. I wanted new charges that would bring him so much time behind bars he never saw freedom again. I'd met his parole officer on many occasions and she knew me well enough that if I had called, she would have investigated Will. Felons have difficult times gaining employment. If he had a job, I had my doubts he was gainfully employed to be able to afford a new Mustang and insurance. I parked down the street from Angie's house in a car that she wouldn't be familiar with. I saw Will's car in her driveway. I had 2 iPhones on my account, one for work and the other for personal use. I walked down to his car and stealthily duct taped my work phone securely to the underside of his back bumper. I went back to my car and used the Find My Phone app to locate my work phone where I knew it to be. At around 2 a.m. when I heard him rev his engine before pulling off from her driveway, I casually followed him, not wanting him to suspect that he was being followed. I was about a quarter mile away from the phone signal when I noticed my phone had stopped moving. I followed the signal to a cruddy looking house in a below average part of Angie's town. His car was parked and he'd already gone inside. I wrote down the license plate number and parked down the street. I slept several hours in view of his house after seeing no activity. When the sun rose, I went and bought some breakfast to eat and returned. Over the course of the day, it was very easy to tell either Will had a lot of friends who saw no reason to stay and talk very long, or he was dealing. He was most likely dealing a highly addictive substance like C, H, or M. After a few hours, many customers returned for more of the substances he was obviously selling. I took photos of each car that stopped by along with some video. I went back each day at about the same time to document the continuing activity. I also observed each night at about 6 p.m. when I knew Angie was getting off of work, he would leave. I trailed him each night to see him meet Angie at a restaurant or went straight to her house. I had major doubts that she'd ever been to his house, at least not that house. I had enough evidence to turn it in to the local police, but I decided to document his activities one more day, as I knew he hadn't been out to get more substances to sell. That last day, I staked out his house around 3 p.m. People stopped coming by, which was unusual. I sat and observed when about 30 minutes later, a large black Cadillac Escalade pulled into his driveway. I had usually seen no more than one person get out of a vehicle and go into Will's house. This time, I observed 3 large males exit the vehicle and open the back door to escort a middle-aged man inside. They stayed in Will's house for over 2 hours, which absolutely nobody had been doing. I was fairly certain the middle-aged man was his source for the substances he was selling. I drove by taking a picture of the Escalade license tag. At home, I downloaded the photos and video I'd taken of Will's activity to my computer. I made a detailed report citing activity from the 4 days I'd observed of what was going on. When I finished, I printed out 30 pages of photos of people heading for Will's door to buy these substances. I saved all video of activity I'd recorded to a SIM card and placed it into a small plastic box for safekeeping. I knew it wouldn't take much to convince the police of what Will was up to. I was giving the cops actual admissible evidence with times and dates stamped on each photo and video, but I wanted to put so much heat on him that the police would be the least of his worries. The next morning, I went by the town's police station in Angie's town. I calmly walked in requesting to speak to someone in their narcotics division. A uniformed officer came out of the office section. I shook his hand and I handed him one of my business cards. He stared at the card for several seconds as two of the lawyers in the firm I worked for regularly worked in Angie's town. The cop knew the business card carried quite a bit of clout, even if I never passed the bar exam. I told him I had some information he might want to take a look at. The detective happily led me back to a conference room where we made small talk about mutual acquaintances. But soon, I pushed a folder of paperwork and the box with the SIM card across the table towards him. Listed on the first pages was Will's full name, date of birth, his criminal record, and parole officer. The detective examined the photos and I sat quietly as he did. By the expressions on his face, he obviously realized he'd been given some information that could easily lead to an arrest warrant for Will. He must have also imagined how much narcotics those arrests could get off the streets, potential promotions, and other positives. He thanked me for the evidence and placed the folder back down on the table. He asked me if I would be willing to testify. I explained how damning the evidence was so I wouldn't have to. He smiled and casually asked if there was anything I needed. I explained that I felt Will had been allowed out of prison far too soon. It was obvious he had not been rehabilitated and deserved to go back to jail for much longer. The detective agreed, but again asked what I wanted in exchange for the information. I pulled out a photo of the black Escalade with a license plate number and pushed it towards him. I asked him to write the tag number down for his own benefit. I explained the owner of the Escalade might be an even bigger dealer. I reaffirmed that I wanted my name kept out of any police or court reports. He agreed. I then lied and said that my firm was representing someone who may have been set up by the owner of the Escalade. He knew I could have gotten one of the lawyers in my firm to call in a favor for the information, but he always knew lawyers like to use their favors sparingly. He thought quietly for a few seconds, realizing I'd given him yet another lead to potentially follow. I'd done more detective work in 5 days than his entire staff had done in months, so he happily agreed. 10 minutes later, he returned with a printout of the tag with the name and address of who it was registered to. I folded the printout and put it into my pocket. The detective and I made some more small talk about sports and cars before I shook his hand and headed out to my car. I drove home knowing that a judge would soon be filling out an arrest warrant for Will. I kept to myself for a few more days, monitoring the arrest reports from Angie's local paper online. One morning, the front site showed a photo of a very bewildered Will being led away in handcuffs. As long as nobody had made any stupid errors to get him off on a technicality, he'd be finishing out his original time plus many additional years. There was always the possibility that he may get a good lawyer to get the charges reduced or find some loophole to get him off scot-free. I couldn't and wouldn't allow that to happen. I drove to the location that the cop had given me. Sure enough, there was a large luxury vehicle sitting in the driveway of a modest house. Down the street, I waited about an hour until I saw what I believed to be one of his bodyguards leave in a different car. I followed and watched the guy go inside a mini-mart. I parked around the other side so my vehicle was hidden. I got out of my car, lit up a smoke, and waited for the guy to come out. My sunglasses obscured my face quite a bit. When he exited the store, I called him over, telling him I needed to tell him something. I'm sure he thought I was just going to ask for gas money or tell him he needed to find Jesus. When I told him I had some information his boss, who I'll call Marcus, might want to know, he was shocked. He asked who I was. I told the guy none of that was important, but I was certain with the information I could give him, Marcus would greatly appreciate it. He began looking around nervously, thinking that it might be a bust, but I told him to relax. I told him to tell Marcus that Will had gotten busted, which he knew to be true, and had every intention of cutting a plea bargain. I suggested that Marcus get one of his boys in county jail to have a talk with Will, but I also explained they all needed to lay low until the heat had died down. Of course, I had no idea if any plea bargain was on the table, but a stranger volunteering such information out of the blue sure as hell wasn't going to look good to his boss. I knew how things work well enough to know that if Will made it to prison, the average dealer had enough connections inside to leave Will eating out of a feeding tube the rest of his days, or worse. As I walked away, the guy asked me my name, and obviously wanted to get his piece from his car. I simply explained that Will had some payback coming from a previous betrayal, and that Marcus had picked the wrong guy to sell his product. That wasn't a lie. He'd betrayed me. Neither Will nor Angie had any inkling of my past, or how vengeful I could be, but it was enough to get the bodyguard to take my advice seriously. He quickly walked to his car as I hurried around the building. I slipped into a grocery store and watched Marcus's bodyguard drive around the parking lot several times looking diligently. When I saw him pull out of the lot and speed down the road, I calmly exited exited the store, got into my car, and drove towards home. I hadn't been driving 10 minutes when my phone rang. The caller ID let me know it was Angie calling. When I answered it, I tried to act surprised and happy to see her. Without even a friendly greeting, she asked how I couldn't have let her know my mother had passed away. She'd seen the obituary in my city's newspaper. I simply replied that it had seemed she was busy enjoying life and that I didn't want to be a burden to her with my grief. I quickly asked why she hadn't been calling or texting as much lately. That led to her changing the subject and asking to see me. I tried my damnness to act happy to hear from her and told her that I missed her. I asked her if she could meet me out for dinner at our favorite restaurant in town. She readily agreed. Since Will was no longer around to keep time with, she was glad to have me back to fill in the void. I showed up to dinner with a smile and a long hug, trying to control the urge to break her spine in half. I was surprised she didn't say anything when I avoided kissing her. I'm sure she just assumed that in my grief, romance wasn't something that I had in my mind much. I just had a very good idea what her mouth had been doing, and I didn't want Will's salad-tossing, knob-slobbering prison germs on me. We sat at the bar and ordered 2 drinks from our favorite bartender. He knew us as a couple because we always tip very well. When our drinks arrived, I excused myself to the restroom and typed a short message out on my phone that read, "Make my drinks with no alcohol and make hers doubles." When I returned from the restroom, I sat next to Angie at the bar discussing drinks we'd enjoyed but hadn't tried in quite a while. I acted as if I was going to pull up the recipe for some unusual drink. The bartender came over and asked if we were ready for another drink. I told him we were celebrating after not seeing each other for quite a while. I held up my phone for him to read the message, asking if he knew how to make that drink. He read the message and smiled, agreeing the drink I'd requested was a specialty of his. I'm sure the bartender and Angie assumed she could get as sloshed as she wanted and that she'd be heading back to her place with me afterward. I had other plans. Angie commented on how strong hers was. I told her I could barely taste it in mine. We ordered several more drinks. Angie commented about how sloshed she felt. I acted confused, stating that I barely felt a buzz at all. After several hours, I paid for our dinner and drinks with a sizable tip. As we exited the door, I acted like I'd gotten a very important call, which I needed to take. After the obligatory nonsense, non-existent phone call, I told her I had to rush back to my town to the office. One of the lawyers needed something for a case early the next morning. I asked her to go to her house and wait on me, promising the errand wouldn't take long. I helped her into her car and watched her pull off before using my cell phone to immediately call the police and tell them that I'd seen a drunk driver leaving that restaurant. I urged them to hurry. The person was in no shape to be driving. I jumped into my car and headed towards Angie's house about 2 miles away. About a mile from her house, I saw blue lights ahead of me and slowed down to see Angie's car pulled over. I knew she was going to get a DWI, as that is in fact what I had planned. What neither she nor I knew was that Will had been using her car to deliver the white powder to low-level dealers under him. They did the obligatory search of Angie's car and found several ounces of the white powder stashed beneath the back seats. I had absolutely no intention of getting her arrested for narcotics possession with the intent to sell, but the fact that Angie had given me her spare car key the same night she'd given me her spare house key, I knew Will could have just as easily been the one to screw up my life. Neither still had any idea that I knew about their unscrupulous cheating that was revealed to all later. As I arrived back at my house and my cell phone rang from a strange number, I answered to hear Angie crying and blubbering while trying to tell me something. I got her to calm down. I actually wanted to hear what she had to say. She managed to tell me that she was in jail, to which I innocently asked where and for what. When she told me what she had been arrested for, I was genuinely shocked about the drug arrest. I asked her what she wanted me to do. She wanted me to help get her out and asked me to post bond. I explained that since my mom had died, I couldn't risk putting up any of my property due to probate issues. I could have easily put my own home up as collateral, but I viewed her drug charges as collateral damage, as she damaged my life enough. The charges for possession of the powder with intent to distribute carried mandatory time. I felt after what she'd done to me, with who she betrayed me with, part of her deserved what was coming to her. I went to her arraignment and sat in the back, hoping not to be noticed. As she entered the courtroom, she saw me. I gave her a look of confusion as to how she could ever be arrested for such a crime. I knew damn well, of course, but I had to act totally oblivious. When she tried to explain to the judge that her boyfriend had been arrested for dealing only a few days before and it had to be his, the judge didn't want to hear it. She turned around and looked at me in shame with tears in her eyes, realizing I knew she'd been cheating. I shook my head in disgust as they led her away. She knew any attempt to contact with me ever again would be a fool's errand. Bond was set extremely high for both. At Will's trial, he pled guilty and asked to forego a trial in an attempt for leniency. He got none. Angie's trial took place a few weeks later and she accepted a plea. She got 6 years with the possibility of parole in 3. But her career was over when she got out and I didn't care one bit. They'd messed with the worst person they could have ever crossed at the absolute worst time to cross me. She started her sentence 2 months ago. Her parents apologized to me. In all honesty, if she cheated on me at any other time in my life with almost anyone else, I doubt I would have sought out any revenge. But as they say, timing is everything, and their timing could not have been worse. In some ways, I'm not proud of what I did. Will deserved to be behind bars for the rest of his days, if for nothing else but for his previous deviant crimes. Angie deserved to have any chance at a future destroyed, though all I had intended for was for her to lose her license and her job. I accomplished both for her, and I hope like hell her years of incarceration are miserable, and she regrets she was ever born. None of us truly ever know who we are dealing with at any given time and who not to cross. But when love turns to hate, any and every human is capable of things they would have never dreamed. All she had to do was tell me she needed a break or say she'd met someone else. Instead, she chose to feed me lies and lies of omission. Be careful who you betray. They just might be willing to go the extra mile to ruin your present and future so badly that you have no future at all. Feel free to think of me as cruel, a monster, or think I deserve just as bad of a punishment as they received. That's your prerogative. And maybe I did, but I didn't get caught by the authorities or someone who'd endured way too much in life to just let things slide. Am I the jerk? Probably the most excruciating part of the entire aftermath was the fact that when he went to her arraignment, her plan was already to tell the judge that she had a boyfriend who was dealing, and that was the reason why they found that in her car. She was obviously surprised that the OP was there, but that wasn't enough to change her game plan. She still said that to the judge in front of him, and then looked at him, which she interpreted as meaning she knew that she could never contact him again. There's a strange question of what ifs when it comes to this situation, because had the OP not known what had happened between the two of them, and she chose not to say this to the judge at that moment, then chances are he probably would have stuck with her. And she knew that, but she thought that the tiny % chance that it would change her outcome legally would be worth forsaking anything with the OP in terms of a relationship. I understand why the OP would be so hurt and angry by all of this, but one of the parts that I don't like or support about what he did was the whole situation when they went to the bar. First of all, it's shocking that the bartender would actually go along with this because you're taking away somebody's choice. And I guess what the OP is trying to say is the reason he was able to pull this off was because the both of them had been to this bar many times and they tipped a lot so that this guy was friendly with them. In other words, the bartender knew that she was with someone safe and not just a random person. But that still doesn't sit right. And it turns out she wasn't with someone safe. She was with somebody that was trying to get her all sloshed up and put her into a dangerous situation. Does that excuse anything that she did to him? No, of course not. But that also doesn't mean that he should have done this. When it comes to the whole police Marcus Will situation, that is very eye-opening how easily the police slipped the OP all this information just because of who they thought that he was associated with. And obviously he provided them value too by creating this whole folder on Will. But the fact that he got all of Marcus's information and he was able to find him, go to his bodyguard, deliver this message, and put Will into actual mortal danger is a testament to how careless some people can be with sensitive information and how far the OP was really willing to go. So now that you know everything, which parts of this revenge do you agree with? Which parts do you disagree with? And jerk or not a jerk, and why? Also, don't forget to subscribe to the second channel where you can hear some of my personal stories, linked down below in the description.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.